Don't even try me, David Hernandez. All right, I'm a little bit late. Look, I'm on European time here. Okay, Texans. They had a draft this weekend, along with the other 31 teams in the NFL. It's just that the Texans draft started on Friday night, where I was there with John Harris and Mark Vandermeer and everybody else. Patty, thank you. Yes, there are a lot of young rookies. Nick, oh come on, Frobius, are you messing with me? Is the sound not here? Tell me if there's Frobius. You can't do this to me, man. You can't, Frobius. Tell me if the sound is here or not, because we had a big old issue with the sound last night. Frobius, honestly, I'll block you. All right. This is what I have to say about the draft. Somebody else, okay, thank you, Bubba. God, Frobius. Frobius was out of my life for like 5 years, and now he's come back to torment me. Look, as Patty, I think, said, I know a lot of you are eager to get a lot of people's opinions on this, and I'll be reacting to other people's opinions as well on here. Look, my first thought, first and foremost, because I tried to stay off of Twitter for the most part, x.com, and just take the draft in and listen to people, absorb things, listen to people like John Harris, who really, really knows his stuff with the prospects. The one thing you always have to remember is that draft grades, or at least the draft feelings amongst fans, understandably, is a lot about name recognition. And then especially this year, where the defensive tackles and the defensive backs especially, I think it was very easy to look and see where Nick Caserio had been reportedly, and admittedly, he talked about trying to trade up into different bands of players or to get guys. I think that there's an appropriate sense that maybe there are some guys that they wish they had that they didn't get. There's another side of it, though, where Nick's philosophy has always been that he wants to trade into bands of players. And it played out exactly that way in the second round. If you look at the way the defensive tackles worked out, if we're going to look at defensive tackles and defensive backs, the two positions that a lot of us had targeted that we'd really like them to see, day two of the draft, I mean, the Texans are sitting at 42. They get to pick 35 defensive tackles. Rukaroro goes. Johnny Newton goes. Skip a pick 38. Tavondre Sweat, who I don't think D'Amico probably would have targeted, and certainly not right there. And then Braden Fisk gets off the board. So three of those four guys are guys that I had kind of put into my own little personal band of guys that I think were really good in that area. Texans wouldn't get a defensive tackle until the last round of the draft with Marcus Harris. Guy that I actually like him. I did a video on him last night if you haven't seen it. I think there's a lot of upside there. But then even with the defensive backs, where they do end up getting Kamari Lassiter at 42, Philly jumped up to 40, got Cooper DeJean. The Saints, probably thinking the same thing all of us were, that the Texans wanted a cornerback. They take Kool-Aid McKinstry. Texans sit tight and get Kamari Lassiter. I think there are a couple things at play here, one of which was that the later picks in the draft this year, the later rounds, were probably devalued because there's so few underclassmen that came out. So there wasn't as much glitz to those guys. And I think in trying to trade back up, he may have gotten caught in a bind there. I'm going to listen to his press conference with D'Amico because I haven't heard that one yet. We'll all be listening to that together. Some of you for the second time, me for the first time. But I am interested in hearing what he says about that. So you hear Cooper DeJean, Kool-Aid McKinstry. Everybody knows those names for good reason. But Kamari Lassiter was a guy that, a lot of the draft nicks had rated him as perhaps a sleeper, a guy that might get. I'm not overly worked up about it. I've just seen too many times. Remember the last big notable time that Philly leapt in front of the Texans to take a player was when they took Andre Dillard in the first round over Titus Howard. Andre Dillard is now, I think, on his third team. He might not have signed anywhere yet this year, but he certainly isn't with Philadelphia. Titus Howard, when he's allowed to play offensive tackle, I think has been a much better offensive tackle than Andre Dillard. I don't know if Dillard's played guard at all. We're going to get into that too. So Kamari Lassiter in the second round. Blake Fisher goes in the second round. Calen Bullock, again, a guy with upside, raw. I don't want to say raw in some respects. He needs refinement in some respects, but a ball hawking safety with really good ball tracking skills. There's a lot to get excited about the more I watch these guys. So we're going to I want to go through a few things here, but I'm also going to show some film of Blake Fisher and Kamari Lassiter, and then I'll do some more of these guys later on, especially as we get into Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I'm going to do some breakdowns of Solomon Byrd, the defensive end that went in the 7th round. Let's see. Happy with a Lassiter pick. I think there's one theme about this that Dillard is with the Packers on the league minimum. Yeah. Finally made it. Bless up. Thank you. Oh, yeah, you made it to a live one. Thank you, Daniel. Good to see you, man. Yeah, Calen just needs to get a bit stronger. He's like the alter ego to Lonnie Johnson, I think. And remember, Lonnie came in and he was a cornerback who was too big to play cornerback, so they moved him to safety. You look at Calen and it's like, oh, this guy's like as skinny as a cornerback. Why is he at safety? The other big reservation people had about Kamari Lassiter was his 40 time. I think if I were to look at a couple of themes of this draft, one would be that there's a few guys that have greater faster game speed than their 40 times would suggest. And I think Lassiter is certainly one of those guys. Jawhar Jordan, the running back they took in the 6th round, I think another guy that didn't test well. That is where some of the GPS tracking, I think, is starting to really factor in a lot. It feels like you're seeing more guys taken where either Mel Kiper or somebody else is saying, don't pay attention to his 40 time. And I think that's where this caught my eye. And yet he started for 3 years, oh, thank you, buddy. Thank you, brother. So I think that was one theme, was just some of the it's funny because you know what happens with the analytics and the technology they're using now. In a lot of ways, we saw this in basketball a lot. In a lot of ways, it just brings everything back to old school, where because it backs up the eyeball test. So where an old school scout back in the day might have said, like, well, I don't care what Jerry Rice's 40 time is. Look at him on the field. You're seeing a lot more of that now, but now they've got numbers to back it up. And I think Nick likes that a lot. He also he's stuck with his trend of taking nothing but Power 5 conference guys, whatever the Pac-12 is called anymore. I don't know if it's a Power 5 or not. But you got Georgia, Notre Dame, USC, Ohio State, Oregon, Louisville, USC, Auburn, and Michigan. Those are all big schools. Decidedly, these damn creditors keep calling. Decidedly non-Patriots way, non-Belichick way. Belichick loved taking guys from smaller schools all the time. There were times where his top 2 picks in the draft were non-Power 5 conferences. Casario's been the exact opposite, and I think some of that goes back into that same philosophy of, look, I can watch these guys against higher level competition every single week. I'm going to see them go up against future NFL players. I can watch them in practice. You know, he talked about this with Derek Stingley, that he was going against Jamar Chase and Jefferson in practice every day. So you've got film of that. He likes that. I've got a bone to pick with Casario the next time we talk to him, because I feel like sometimes, you try not to take things personally, but there's no way in hell Nick Casario would have drafted me to the Texans, because I played at a smaller school. So I'm offended by him. He also won't give me a scouting report from back in the day either, which leads me to believe that maybe it wasn't that good. Belichick would have loved my ass, my small school ass, my big ass from a small school. Yeah, LaDarius needs got a sus 40 time. Not a big deal if you play with anticipation. Yeah, Lassiter plays with his hair on fire or head on fire. We're gonna get to that. Okay. All right. You know what? I gotta loosen up a little bit. Hey, look at this. Look. Got my new gift from Mark Vandermeer. Thank you, Mark. The other theme would be that swarm. The acronym that just means swarm, but because you got to make everything to an acronym in coaching. It's a special work ethic and relentless mindset. I think this year you really saw D'Amico and Nick start to really kind of mesh in terms of understanding each other and going after the right kinds of guys in their minds. So we're going to see that, especially when we look at the Lassiter film. Lassiter, the only thing I fear about Lassiter is that he might concuss himself too often, because he's just crazy. I don't know which decidedly is a comment too. Number one draft. Thank you. I'm not doing any IPAs or any alcohol for at least 4 days. I had a long day yesterday, and I almost I ended up getting a good night's sleep, and I got the sound working and everything. So let's see. Did I go over the trends? The Power Five dudes. I'm offended on a personal level. The swarm mentality. I like. You look at Kamari Lassiter. 40 time great, or 40 time isn't great, but great. So 2.8 yards per attempt as a primary defender in coverage last season. That ranks third in the FBS. I had a Dan Matthews, who's now back in Houston, but was in Atlanta forever, talked about how physical the practice is at Georgia, and that like Kamari Lassiter was all about that program and how they operate things. They call their Tuesday practice, where it's full contact, a lot of times Bloody Tuesday. So you get a feel of, everything that D'Amico likes about Alabama guys and the way Saban runs his program. I think there's some elements of that with Kirby too, to where you take guys that were on a championship caliber team, so they got that attitude in them. They're infused with that championship mentality, like a Will Anderson type. And I think that's a lot of what they like about Lassiter. I'm not saying that they wouldn't have taken one of the other guys, the Kool-Aid or Cooper DeJean. I just think that Nick very much tries to be as egoless as possible, and like, not when you start getting married to guys or emotionally tied to guys who are in the same group, and like, what you do is, and GMs do this all, as much as GMs complain about the media and the way they cover the draft, those hypocritical son of bitches, a lot of them are just as irrational about the draft, and they fall in love with guys and they start trading up aggressively because they value their own opinion. One thing that I think Nick has brought with him from New England was that New England would usually grade out as one of the teams that was smarter about trading back, just being more conservative and not reaching, doing all those things. Sometimes that's easy to do when you've got Tom Brady as your quarterback and a defensive genius as your head coach. But I like to think the Texans have not just a defensive genius, but a people genius as their head coach. And he tries to stand pat and not overpay on these things. So it leads to something, a draft that's sometimes underwhelming in some people's minds, but honestly, like, it's the long-term approach. It's the difference between, like, in investing, it's the difference, or even just in business in general. The boring businesses are really, really profitable at times, but man, the hot new thing sure is exciting, and I can get 10 times my value. I'm gonna get 10 times my return. I'll make 10 times my money in 9 months. You know how that goes. The old risk reward deal. Let's see. I propose that Miko drafted hunters. You know what, Lassiter? Oh, I should have added that. Maybe after I sputter out and slow down a little bit on this live stream, which is going to go way longer than I probably should. Maybe we'll play Lassiter talking about fishing, because I got excited for John Lopez. Lassiter said he's a pond fisher. He's willing to try deep sea fishing, but he hasn't yet. He looked a little bit nervous when the interviewer brought up like sharks and barracudas and stuff. Oh, Scott Love made a good point. What's Scott Love's point? Here we go. All right. Am I crazy? When you watch Bullock attack, track, and catch balls, you could see him in an offensive package trying to catch some balls. He looks so comfortable. Could be a two-way guy. The only problem that I have with that. Let's table that until year 3, because he needs to work on a few of the finer aspects of tackling and playing defense. He's a willing tackler, but man, he flings himself in there. Lassiter is a really willing tackler too, and who sometimes flings himself in there a little too hard and fast. D'Amico doesn't seem to care about that as much, as long as you got guys swarming in behind him. He's got just a kind of a shoot your shot approach, which you can get away with as long as you've got guys rallying to the ball. Like, that's the key. It's kind of like playing full court press, you can be super aggressive defensively as long as everybody's doing it in basketball. Once everybody stops doing it, you're kind of hosed. So the other part too, I guess, was just Nick not being nearly as exciting with the other theme. If I were to go for a fourth theme, Nick wasn't nearly as aggressive trading, obviously. I think if he had successfully traded up into the first round, then I think Terry and what's his face there, the cornerback out of Alabama, like if they had landed him, people would have been stoked about that. to get back to, before we get to Nick and D'Amico, to get back to the old name recognition game and how sometimes it's really tempting after the draft, immediately after the draft, to say, oh, I know that guy's name and I heard that guy talked about a lot, and clearly this team did better than that team. I think honestly that's what the Texans last year got a lot of positive grades for being aggressive as hell for Will Anderson, and getting Tank Dell where they did, but certainly, and then taking CJ Stroud. That's awesome. That's all well and good, but you don't know, to go all Nick Caserio here, you just flat out don't know until they get out there and do it. So I don't do draft grades. I'm gonna read some draft grades later, but I don't do draft grades because I don't need the clicks. And that's all. It's for clicks, it's for clicks. You do it. Nobody reads the 3-year draft grade. They do these in July and everything because they need content, but nobody actually reads it or watches it. It's the heat of the moment. So there's things to get excited about these guys. When we do some of the player breakdowns, and you'll see this how I do it over the week. I'm going to show you the highlights first. I'm going to talk about the player, listen to the press conferences and what Nick has to say about these guys. And then at the tail end, I like to do what they need to work on, whatever their weaknesses are that they need to improve, areas of opportunity, whatever you call it. I don't like to talk about how guys can't do something because, again, it's just as stupid to say a guy can't and never will do something in the NFL as it is stupid to say, oh, yeah, this guy's a guaranteed all-pro. You just don't know. You got to have some level of humility on it. Texans over the trade 4th round to move up 6 spots to draft a safety and get back 7th round from the Eagles. Yeah, I'm not saying he didn't. I'm saying he didn't draft at all or trade at all. But he had 8 trades last year. Somebody tell me. I didn't keep. What were the total? Yeah, whatever. All right. So Nick and D'Amico. This will be my first time watching this. I did not get to see these guys yesterday. Miko looks really happy.
In case we pushed you to sleep. All good? I'm waiting a few more. So, all right. We got the loyal crowd right here.
Yeah.
So.
They thought y'all would still be back there pulling out some trades. Thought you had a couple
Is Nick taking another shot at me?
more trades.
We'll save them for next year. So that's what the spring is for.
You guys can start with the question.
Yeah, go ahead. Look, just real quick. Again, another productive day for us. A lot of good conversations in the draft room. A lot of work, a lot of effort. D'Amico and I were just talking. It feels like we grinded out a win, but that's what this is about. And really what we did today, hopefully, is continue to build the depth of our team with a lot of good quality guys. It's about competition. That's kind of what this day is usually about. So you guys can go ahead and ask some questions, and we'll answer.
For those of you guys that haven't seen the press conferences yet, there isn't just H-Town blue and new uniforms and everything else. You can actually hear the questions now. So I don't have to spend a half hour going through the transcripts and figuring out what's actually being asked.
Nico, when you look at what was accomplished in all 3 days, how do you feel about where this sets you guys up and just kind of the young men you brought in?
We're very excited about all the guys that we brought in. Feel like all these guys are quality players that add to the depth, add to the competition of our team. And so we're excited about the guys. We like all the guys that we were able to pick, and we want to work with these guys. And we're fired up about it.
Hey, competition, another big theme. I'm going to keep adding to the themes here. We've got 5 themes now. Competition was big. That was mentioned a few times the other night when Nick was asked about competing opposite Derek Stingley. I don't think that Lassiter immediately gets penciled in. There's no way in hell they pencil him in front of Okudah or Henderson right away. That's not the Nick Caserio way. Patriots way, you can go pound sand. I don't care what. It's the Nick and D'Amico way.
Nick, you had mentioned yesterday how Jared Patterson was able to help provide insight on Blake. What type of insight may CJ have been able to provide on?
Oh, okay. So he's referencing the fact that Blake Fisher a couple times mentioned Jarrett Patterson, and how helpful Jarrett Patterson was to Blake Fisher when he was a rookie.
Cade, and what's your impression of him?
Yeah,
So, okay, let me ask.
provide insight on Blake. What type of insight may CJ have been able to provide on Cade and what?
Oh, okay. The insight. I apologize. They had asked Jarrett Patterson about Blake Fisher. So I think he was going to ask CJ, who has a relationship with Calen Bullock, if he gave any no, probably Cade Stover. Dang it. Oh, so Calen knows CJ well, but obviously Cade Stover as well.
Rewards impressions of him.
Yeah, honestly, as soon as a player comes in your building, when you draft them, you can go back to a year or during the course of the fall. You always have different conversations about different players because they're always conscious of their alma mater and how they're doing. So whether it's Patterson, whether it's Will Anderson, whether it's CJ, they know our team. They know the type of people that we want in this building, and they have insight, probably better insight than maybe we even have. And I would say when you look at a lot of our players, JP, Will, C. Harris, CJ, they understand football and they're very perceptive, so they can provide valuable insight. So we certainly we'd be remiss if we didn't utilize that information. So it's not the driving force, but it's helpful in the overall evaluation. So if we have a question, maybe it's something that we go to Patterson with and say, hey, we're not sure about this. What are your thoughts on this? Because ultimately it's about the players, and they're going to be sitting next to each other in this room just like they were at their alma mater. So we'll utilize the information wherever it's provided and try to make a good decision with that, with that assessment.
Every time they talk about that, because they asked CJ, remember what he felt about Tank, and then they basically asked CJ to spy on Tank by giving him a call. Hold on one second here. College coaches have to be really careful about, they don't want to bash a guy when NFL coaches ask them, but they'll say enough that people can read between the lines. But they know that they do it every single spring and every fall. With players, I try to put myself in the shoe of if they asked me about a dude that I just did not like, I would be so stressed. I'd be stressed. I'd be stressed for weeks about it afterwards. Pretty much probably for my whole life if I didn't like the guy and I said something negative about him. Yeah, I'm a perfect person to ask for a reference because I err towards positivity. But you're also the perfect, so don't listen to my references.
Several of the players that you drafted, and it's been, I think, now 2 or 3 drafts. You not only go for position versatility, but you also go for captains. What is the standout when it comes to the captain persona, just the leadership? Is it something that you covet for certain players, or just criteria, just overall thoughts when it comes to that?
Yeah, leadership comes in all different shapes and sizes. I mean, there's a reason his nickname's Cap. So that's important. When you wear that C on your chest, it's important. So we don't go out and say we're going to or we have to draft captains. It's usually pretty organic. It's a part of the evaluation. But if you're elected captain, it says something about what your teammates think of you. So it's not something where we're looking for a box and say, well, we're just going to draft captains. Well, if it works out that way, great. But they have, obviously, they're respected by their peers. They're respected by their teammates. And like we've talked about, the type of people that we bring in this building absolutely matters, and we're always gonna put a premium on that.
I think it's another one of those things too, where it might not be a necessity, but it's one of those things. If a guy isn't a captain, especially if he's the best player on the team and he's not a captain, you want to dig into that, right? I mean, because usually it's kind of like student council president. It's not always the smartest or most capable. It's the most popular guy. So the best football players tend to be captains on their teams. Now, when you're only drafted from Power 5 conferences, it's a lot of competition for being a captain. But also B, it's that much more of a show of respect if they are captains.
Take a look at the draft selection of Jordan, the running back. What do you think he would be able to provide to your offensive backfield?
We really like the juice that he has out of the backfield. I think he has plays with tremendous speed, so we're looking to add some speed to our backfield, and we think he provides that for us. And he also provides some special teams value as well as a returner. So really excited about the role that he's shown that he was able to do at Louisville, and excited about seeing him come in and compete here.
So Jawhar Jordan, another guy whose 40 time doesn't really reflect his speed. D'Amico obviously, in referencing his speed, thinks he's plenty fast enough. I've only watched highlights of Jawhar Jordan now, so obviously, the guys that are 6 and I felt bad last night because I put Marcus Harris, the 7th round pick, up there, and I just wanted to show his negative plays. And but you see why they're 7th round picks sometimes. That doesn't mean that they can't elevate themselves out of that. It's just there's work to do, obviously.
Nick, I know you talk about picking players more on just are they good players instead of need, but now that you're finished with the draft, do you feel like you addressed some needs that this team had?
Yeah, your team's never really the finished product. So part of between now and honestly training camp, now we'll kind of go into the evaluation of where the team actually is. We may think it looks one way on paper. Then when we get more information here in the spring, we're going to start phase 2. So it's first opportunity, where the staff will be on the field with the players. So we're going to get more information. Then we're getting to training camp. There's a good chance the team, for the most part, it'll look the way it looks today, but there might be something that pops up. I'd say what you're going to find is there'll be several players that are going to be available because of decisions or moves that other teams have made. So maybe there's an opportunity at a certain position. Maybe we think if we can upgrade the depth or add a player that has value at a certain position, that might be an opportunity for us to add that player to our team. So we're in a decent spot. We're excited about where we are. We'll probably have a lot of movement here between now and probably the end of the spring. There'll probably be some players who we move on from here over the next few weeks, but that's just the attrition that goes on this time of year. So we'll get more information as we go, Christy, and then make a decision that ultimately we feel is best for the team.
Yeah, the old best player available versus need. I guess Blake Fisher he can't play guard. Like Nick says he's not going to play guard. Blake Fisher says he's never played guard. I watch him and I don't think he's going to play guard. I think that very much was I'm going to make a comparison here, but don't think I'm making a direct player comparison. When the Ravens drafted Jonathan Ogden, they already had 2 good offensive tackles. That's an extreme example, obviously, but the Ravens are a team that they've done that multiple times. That's the most extreme example, but they've done that multiple times with players who didn't end up being Hall of Famers, but they take the absolute best player available. What a lot of teams do is they say they're taking the best player available, but they've already kind of tweaked to their board by what their needs are and what the team looks like. So it's easy for them on draft day to be like, oh yeah, this is the best player available. We're taking him. You don't have to think about it, but it's already been tweaked in advance a little bit. I think Nick veers more towards the Baltimore side of things, but we do tend to end up like taking the appropriately right position. Quarterback obviously is a whole nother deal. Real quick, because I saw this in the comments. You guys are active today. All right, so this is something I was guilty of, Tiff, is that I've relented a little bit on Cade Stover not blocking well enough. I think for one, like the PFF scores skewed it somewhat, but 2, it's that he is really just learning how to play tight end in a lot of ways. And he's a running back in high school and a defensive end at first in college, and just he's switched into it. So I don't want to say raw because he's so fluid in a lot of ways as a receiver, as a runner after the catch, averaged 6.9 yards after the catch last year, and looks very, very natural. Comes back towards the ball aggressively. One of my pet peeves is when people don't come back to the ball aggressively, because you get picked, you miss out on completions, all that. Like Cade Stover does a lot of stuff naturally that he's also still just learning. So he's a willing blocker. I think he just needs more reps at it. So I'm not overly concerned about that. And obviously, if he ends up being a good enough receiver, it doesn't matter anyway, because it's 2024 and everything that was good about the NFL is being taken away.
Jamal Hill, that was I think that was the last pick of all the assets that you guys were able to accumulate from the Deshaun Watson trade. And looking back, a short period of time, how much do you think all the assets that you guys were able to accumulate help put you guys in a position now where you feel like if you had to play a game today, you guys could go and play a game today?
Okay, so it started off asking about all the assets that they got for Deshaun Watson, and that was the completion. We've closed the chapter on the Deshaun Watson trade. All the picks are gone and accounted for, and because Nick trades so much, it gets kind of complex to figure out. And then how do you feel, because you've added all those pieces?
Yeah, honestly, that's so far in the past. You guys are keeping track of that. We haven't spent one second talking about, here's the end result. So we're just adding football players to the team with the opportunities that we get, regardless of what trade took place. D'Amico and I have talked about this. We talked about it before the draft. If we have to go out there and play a game, before the draft, we felt that we'd be competitive. So in the end, it's just each year you have an opportunity to add players to your team. However you acquire the assets, you acquire them. And there's no, specific formula. So that's for you all to talk about. Honestly, like, we probably haven't spent time on it since we did the trade however many years ago.
So just to put a bow on it, let's see. This is on Yahoo. The Texans have clearly won the deal for the Deshaun Watson trade. Yeah, I think I read a couple things out of Buffalo this morning talking about the Stephon Diggs trade and arguing this, that, or the other. This is clearly better with the Texans are way better off, especially given the way Deshaun Watson has played when he's been healthy occasionally. Let's see. So Houston received a 2022 first round pick that became Kenyon Green. A 2020. We'll just wait on it. Everybody, Mark and John told me that Kenyon Green is there working out every single day, and he was able to actually get healthy and start working out with a fresh and clean slate for the first time in 3 years. So Kenyon Green, 2022 fourth round pick that became running back Dameon Pierce. I haven't given up on him just because I love him so much. I'm married for life. Okay. 2023 first round pick became Will Anderson. A third round pick became Tank Dell. Yeah, that's not bad. Second round pick became Kamari Lassiter. The sixth round pick became Jamal Hill. And the 2024 fourth round pick became safety Cade Bullock. So that's pretty much the end of it. And Calen. I've seen that. It's Calen. They wrote Caden. I promise you. I did not misread that. Calen Bullock. So depending on how Calen Bullock works out, the Will Anderson alone, and obviously some of those are half picks and everything.
Nick and D'Amico, address the two players y'all pulled off of University of Southern Cal. You got the safety, you got the edge rusher. Who was looking at which one? Obviously, the safety stood out first, but was there somebody, once y'all started looking at SC, that the second one just sort of stood out, and we sort of had them ranked on the board where you can come back and pick them up?
Since they're both defensive players, I'll defer to the head coach.
Definitely, with.
So I couldn't really hear the complete question. I know it was about USC and the defensive players that they drafted, including Solomon Byrd. It is interesting. They went with Kamari Lassiter, from an incredibly astounding, defensive tradition as of late, and then they went with the team that two guys from a defense that could have theoretically cost Caleb Williams the first overall pick, because Caleb had to bail out his defense as much as possible.
Starting with Bullock, right? You see just his ball skills, his range, back there in the deep half of the field. It's just stood out. Right? He's an exceptional playmaker, attack the ball. It's what we are about on defense, attacking the ball, and that's what Bullock does. That's what we're looking for him to do for us. And then when it came to Byrd, just looking at guys who has the traits there to play our style up front. He plays hard, relentless. He's a tough player, and then he has the skill to get after the quarterback. So we're excited about adding a guy at that point in the draft, adding a guy who had the skill set that we like, length, and he can rush the quarterback.
He's got kids too, right? That's good. Something to keep you right. It drive you crazy, but it keep you right.
We got to speak to you, Nick, about this yesterday, but when it comes to Kamari Lassiter, the cornerback from Georgia, what were some things that you noticed about his film that really stood out, and what were some things that you think he can provide for this defense immediately?
Yeah, Kamari provides toughness. He provides, you talk about energy and the way he plays the game, he loves football, and it shows on the tape. It jumps off the tape. He's a versatile player. He can play inside. He can play outside. But you talk about a guy who's a leader, a guy who works hard. He's everything that our team is about. We talk about everything being relentless and attacking the day with a relentless mindset every single day. That's what Kamari brings.
That's what, honestly, Dan Matthews was telling me, refuses to leave the field, loves special teams. That's big. Remember when we did the math and we figured that, okay, Bill O'Brien told a story about a second round pick who didn't feel like he should have to play special teams, and it added up to look like it was probably DJ Swearinger. This is the anti-DJ Swearinger. This is a second round defensive back who really loves to play special teams. So however it plays out, whether he's a starter or not, I would imagine we see Lassiter play some special teams this year.
One of the things that you like to do is to develop talent, to develop those late round guys. You bring them in and build them up. How exciting was it for you to get that wealth of talent that you got today, this last day? There were a lot of good players still available for you all.
Yeah, that's the most exciting thing to me about coaching is developing guys, seeing where they are. You select guys who have traits that you like, traits that you think will translate to helping us. And then as coaches, we have to help them, right, those next few steps to get them to maximize their talent and play to their capability, right? And so that's what I'm most excited about when you see the growth of a player from where he is once you get him to where the things you can help him, right, grow it as a player. That's why I like coaching, and that's why I enjoy coaching, is seeing the development. Nobody is a finished product once we get them, but these guys, all the guys we selected have, first off, their makeup, they're all really great people, right? And that's one thing we pride ourselves on is adding great people to our locker room, and then you get to the player that we had really good players with great traits, and we're excited to work with all of them.
Okay, so – and I was remiss because there was another couple things I wanted to comment on that he had said about Kamari Lassiter. So Kamari Lassiter and D'Amico Ryans both. Why I like D'Amico Ryans and why D'Amico Ryans likes Kamari Lassiter. I think whether you want to call it instincts or just his training, because I know, look, these guys both really respect the coaches at Georgia, and Lassiter, part of him not, like, part of his 40 time not mattering is that I think he's got really good game speed. He just might not be a good tester, but B, his ability to recognize routes, his ability to anticipate, his understanding of, like, when he's face guarding, reading the receiver's eyes to go back and go for the ball. He might not be able to catch the ball, but he breaks up the pass. So he's really good in all those respects. So his anticipation, his understanding what the offense is trying to do to him. Texans, when they do pattern matching or zone to read, basically when your defensive backs are off and they don't have to be playing press man, but when it turns into man because they see a certain pattern, that's the kind of stuff that D'Amico loves. Because when you have a defensive back who can do that, it frees up a lot of other things to do with the defense. So I think they're going to really like him for that. As far as D'Amico talking about loving coaching, most of you guys know, when I was in my 10th and last year in the NFL, D'Amico was a rookie. And like, all the stories about him are 100% true as far as just understanding and seeing that, wow, this kid's just different. He's the real deal. But I got injured that year. So I was sitting at home watching the away games with my wife a lot. And, or even after the home games, my wife would talk to me. And she's like, this D'Amico, it's just, he's all over the place. He's like sideline to side. And at the time, Kylie Wong was coming off of an injury and, wasn't quite himself. He tore his knee up bad. But Brandy told me, yeah, like all those plays that Kylie used to make, because Kylie had a really good motor too. Like all those plays that Kylie used to make, Kylie's were almost there. And all of a sudden D'Amico shows up out of nowhere and blasts the guy on the sideline. So, social skills, Seth, as I was talking to Kylie a week or two later about like how well D'Amico is playing, I told him that story, and he was like, thanks, Seth. It's exactly what I needed to hear as I'm trying to fight back from this injury, is how much better D'Amico is than me. From your wife. Thanks a lot. But then my wife's also a coach. So now that she's seen D'Amico and his approach to coaching and like just how much he loves the guys he's coaching and everything. She might go commission a statue for D'Amico. It's like even before he wins 3 Super Bowls.
For D'Amico, what was some of the feedback out of Columbus in terms of work ethic, toughness? Any stories about Cade Stover, things you guys heard?
Yeah,
stories out of Columbus about Cade Stover.
Whatever it is, it's elite. I mean, this guy is as tough and hard-nosed a player that they had in the program. Just kind of going back to the question and D'Amico's answer about developing players, I'd say Cade's a good example of a player who's only played tight end for 2 years, so he's certainly not a finished product, but he has the mindset and the work ethic to improve. I mean, how he was raised. I mean, this guy is everything you want in a football player and then more, I mean, he probably played hurt this year. I mean, I think he had an MCL or had an issue where, quite frankly, it would have limited some other players, but he just braced it up and he just kept playing football. So, I mean, I don't want to speak for D'Amico, but I think we feel the same way. This is probably one of our favorite football players in the entire draft.
I wish Nick knew for sure that it was an MCL. Like, I hope it's not like, I think it was an ACL and it turns out it was 2 ACLs or something.
Regardless of position, because of his mentality, because of his mindset. And he still is developing as a player. I mean, 2 years ago, he was playing defensive end in the Rose Bowl against Utah. Now he's, played tight end for 2 years, and here he is getting picked in the bottom of the 4th round. And his position is, we think tight end. That's why we drafted him. So, but I mean, blue collar as they come, and from a makeup, traits, toughness, mentality. I mean, this is an elite guy.
Literally blue collar, comes from a farming family. And I know a few hundred of you have joined us since we talked about this last. The concerns about his blocking, I had questions, and then I was educated. It was when I first knew about Cade Stover, I didn't realize that he had moved from high school running back to college defensive end to now just really these last couple of years learning how to play tight end. So he's a willing blocker. It's going to take a little bit of time, I think. I think sometimes there is a tendency almost, because there's so few farm kids anymore, you almost just assume that a farm kid's going to be a tough kid. Like they got more experience with hard physical labor and doing stuff that you don't want to do. I come from a farming family, so I grew up working on farms and everything. And it is like everything you do on a farm, or a lot of the stuff you do on a farm, is so much more miserable than anything you have to do in 2-a-days or anything. That as soon as you find out a guy's a farm kid, like almost 100% of the time, they're just like good, solid dudes that bust their ass and don't complain a lot. That was the one difference with me. I bitched a lot. That's why I'm good on talk radio.
We'll take a few more.
There was a moment where the cameras, I think it was the Texans cameras, kind of caught y'all celebrating. If it's okay. What
Which pick? I don't know. We celebrate after a bunch of them.
It was like one in particular where you dapped D'Amico up.
I think it was Bullock.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay. Oh, this is going to be good. After the Bullock trade, or after the Bullock pick, I think Caserio got about as, because sometimes Caserio really shows his human side. And I thought on the Friday night press conference, he talked about Bullock in a way that just it felt like he has genuine affection for Bullock, because the kid had much like CJ Stroud, who Southern California connection, obviously there, and Bullock knows him, but Bullock's dad died when he was 10. CJ lost his father for other reasons, I guess I should explain that for those of you who don't know. CJ's dad went to jail when he was 13 years old. So different circumstances, but that void in their life. So I think they probably, from being in the same area, Bullock told us when we interviewed him at the draft after the draft on Friday night, that CJ had given him some good advice. So,
okay, well, what about that was so?
My point, as I let somebody finish their question, is that Caserio seems to really like Bullock.
Exciting. What about that particular moment? If it's okay to ask that.
I think it's all exciting, man. The draft is just such an exciting process, and you go through and you study so many guys, right? And you have a select number of guys that you like and guys that you will want to work with, but you never really know how it's going to shape out, because 9 times out of 10, the other teams like the same players. So for us to get guys that we truly, have kind of highlighted to start the process, guys who've always kind of stuck out in their process, and for us to get guys like that, like Stover, like Bullock, right, Lassiter, it's exciting when you're able, and the guy that you're adding to your team, right? The competitor that he is, what type of football player he is. It's exciting. So all of our picks we were celebrating after. I don't think it was just one. We celebrate after all of them.
Oh,
okay. I saw one of you mention earlier that he had conspicuously left out Blake Fisher there when he talked about all those guys we really like. They drafted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 9. They drafted 9 guys. You can't mention everybody every time. But it's funny because I did, when Sarge on Friday night asked about the swarm mentality, it felt like Nick kind of enthusiastically said that Lassiter and Bullock were the swarm mentality, and kind of threw Fisher in there as well. I don't know. I think Fisher does have that in him. He looks like he wants to finish. there's some physical strength as a taller, lankier guy that I think some of that has to come with time. So it might be as simple as that. Plus, look, I'll be honest with you, man. Like, there's something like the kids from Notre Dame that like speak the King's English and do everything right and good grades in school and everything. Like, they're just kind of boring. Like, sometimes it's the kids that had it rough growing up, or they just got like a spark to them. If they got like a lot of personality, you gravitate towards them. Like, there's just and Bullock, and I haven't watched his post draft yet, but we interviewed him afterwards. That kid's got personality, and his backstory is that he had some adversity, lived with his grandma so he could stay playing at his high school, his last few years of school. Like, he's had some adversity, and there's a natural affection for that. You want to help those kids out. Blake Fish will be just fine. He can go work for a hedge fund if he doesn't make it in the NFL.
Like D'Amico, like, we have fun. Like, and we've talked about this. I mean, the beauty of it, I mean, my respect for him is massive, but we see football through the same lens, and we're looking at a lot of the same things in players. We may have a variance of opinion, but we talk through everything. And this was a player that we had earmarked, quite frankly. We had talked about him maybe at 59 if we had the opportunity to pick him. And then I think we maneuvered. We had to move up a few spots. I think that's where we traded up. We gave 123 to move up a few slots. And we were able to get the player that we wanted because it's a player we had identified. And not that you're doing this the reason you're doing it, but the number of teams that kind of reached out to us after the pick, I mean, there was a few teams that, were basically saying they were getting ready to write the guy's name down. So it doesn't mean that we're right or wrong. It just means that, to D'Amico's point, these are players, there's certain players that you say, if we have an opportunity to add them to the team, let's figure out a way to do it. Let's be responsible and not be egregious with it. And I would say in Bullock's case, that was a situation. I mean, I don't know who was more excited, D'Amico or Stephen A., but it was pretty close. So again, we enjoy what we do. Like, we put so much time and effort into it, and like, we show that emotion. I mean, you've seen him chase the officials down the sideline, so he's faster than me, so I can't keep up.
Couple things. Somebody had mentioned, Daniel Barnett. Casario's body language makes me think he feels a little less comfortable with his draft. It looks like he's clutching his briefcase, creating a barrier between him and the reporters. I disagree. I think he's wearing his vest. His arms are cold. He should have, I feel like he obstinately decided, nope, I'm going to wear the vest. I don't care what anybody says. And then he got in there and he realized, we keep this place too damn cold. I don't know.
All of your
and then as far as what he said about teams calling him and saying like, hey, we were about to take that guy. That's one of my least favorite things about draft day is when people they just so confidently say, oh, you could have drafted that guy in the second round. Because think about it from this perspective too, because the opposite way works too. If the Texans had traded up into the first round to take like Johnny Newton, because Johnny Newton was mocked in the first round to a lot of places, if they had traded up to 23, maybe they could get the same exact package to trade back up to 23, and they'd take Johnny Newton. Nobody would have said like, oh, they could have gotten him at the beginning of the second round. They didn't have to do that. You just never know. You don't know what these teams' boards are. Rant over.
6th and 7th round picks were 5-year college players, and Byrd was 6 years. Are there benefits to having players that have so much experience and are maybe a little bit older?
It's a good question, Christy. It's kind of the inverse of some of the players that maybe they're all developmental players, but some have a lot of experience and have played more football, so maybe they're further along. But there's certain things technique-wise, I would say in Byrd's situation, like you said, 5-6 years, however long it's been, and he's different than most college kids. I mean, he's married or has a relationship, has children, so he's pretty mature for his age. So that's certainly important, and they're approaching it, and this is a job. This is their job, and some have experienced that in college. I'd say the NIL, to a certain extent, has maybe forced different players to have a different type of mindset, so they have encountered some of the things that they're going to encounter on a day-to-day basis when they walk in our building. But Byrd had a lot of experience. Henderson was a player who started, 40 games between ASU and then at Michigan last year. So you have players that are at varying levels of development, and then our job, like D'Amico said, as a staff, is to get them to perform at whatever their optimum level is, to get to a point where they can perform and develop over the course of however many years it is.
The other thing that's kind of strange about this year is that there were so few, the fewest underclassmen in many, many years this year in the draft for a couple of reasons. One, NIL is guaranteed money. So I guess the average, this is crazy. Like the average starter at a Power 5 conference is getting about $200,000 in NIL money, supposedly, according to an article I read. But if you look at the math of that, where, okay, a guy can take 200,000 guaranteed versus if he goes to an NFL team, he's got to make the team. First he's got to get drafted or signed as an undrafted free agent, because when you declare for the draft, you can't go back. It's not baseball, you can't go back into it. You're done. You're out there in the world without a college degree because you've left early, and you don't get drafted. You don't get picked up, or you get picked up and you get cut. That's it. That's done for you. Versus 200,000 guaranteed to go back, play college football, not a bad gig, and then maybe improve your position the next year. So a lot more guys are doing that. But then on the flip side of it, you have all these guys, like Solomon, Byrd, who are like fifth year guys who have 5 years of experience because of that COVID year. So you've either got really old dudes or young puppies, but like it's the later rounds just weren't the same this year. And that's one of the reasons that everything was a little bit devalued. And I think probably, like Nick treats those 6th and 7th round picks kind of like pocket change to move up in the draft. And I think that pocket change was devalued. It went from like being a nickel to a penny this year. And I think that I don't feel overly worried or concerned about it, but I don't think that ideally he really wanted to draft 5 guys in the 6th and 7th round, but it's the way it worked out.
Nick, I asked you about this last night about Blake being able to move inside, but yet like you just mentioned Henderson, you picked up, he spent a lot of time at tackle, then he kind of spent a lot of time at guard, i.e. on the left side. Is that somewhat indicating that that might be a fit that you might want to move in there, and maybe can move Titus back out to tackle again? Y'all still playing with combinations? It's just something projecting down the line.
Okay, so the question basically was that LaDarius Henderson has played multiple positions. The previous evening, Nick had said that he doesn't think Blake Fisher's a guard, or they don't plan on moving him down to guard. So what does this all mean for Titus Howard and the rest of the bunch?
Yeah, I know that's something that's talked about quite a bit with Titus. Probably that horse has been beaten. Titus is a good football player. He's a good tackle, and hopefully have the opportunity to continue to play him at tackle. But we're just trying to get the best 5 on the field. But I'd say specific to Henderson, has experience maybe even more inside than outside. He was in Arizona State. He played some guard, so he's probably a little bit different than Blake. And even when you look at him, like physically, like they're a little bit different, even though they might be similar. So we'll see how it goes. But we think Henderson can probably play inside with the ability to bump out the tackle. Blake, like we talked about last night, probably a little bit more tackle-centric and tackle-focused. So we'll see how it goes here in the course of the spring, and then once we get into training camp for sure.
Obviously, you like all the players you drafted today. Is there a person or an area where you're especially excited about working with one of the draft picks?
By the way, as far as the Titus Howard stuff and everything, I'm going to talk about more later when we do the Friday night, and also when I do Blake Fisher's film. I very much agree that Blake Fisher should not be moving into guard anytime soon. I like him, but there's just it's like the analogy I always use is like, hey, like Will Anderson is an awesome defensive end. Does that mean because he's so athletic and he plays a higher paid position that he could play nose tackle? Of course it doesn't. He would get destroyed. He would try really, really hard, but he would get destroyed at nose tackle. So likewise, sometimes offensive tackles, especially the more athletic or the taller, leaner ones, like that's the specific reason that they don't move inside. And I think Blake Fisher is probably a guy that doesn't move inside.
Like you said, all of them are equal to me. Like I think we've added great players offense and great players on defense. So there's not one player in particular. I love all our picks that we had, and I'm excited to work with all of them. All our coaches, they're all fired up and excited to work with the guys that we picked as well.
One of the things we got Kim and Cole, and then we'll do a couple more.
When we talked to guys after each round, we had a chance to interview them briefly. Many of them said, when you ask them to talk about themselves, they said, they run hard, they play hard, they love football. It seemed to be the same kind of theme. Is that, I guess that's the swarm relentless, is that what you're looking for, those kind of players?
For sure, Kim, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for players who want to swarm. That's the mentality. That's how I see football. I mean, you only got so long to play it. You give it everything you have. You play as hard as you can possibly play, exhaust all the resources to be your absolute best, and we're here to help all of our players reach their best. So I love that all the players say that, because that's kind of how I tilted. Like, those are the guys that stick out to me, guys who, and you can see it on film, guys who love playing football, guys who love playing hard. They know what it looks like, so we don't have to teach them that once they get here. Now we're focused on just honing in on the fundamentals and techniques and getting technically better as a player. But once that ball is snapped, we need everybody playing with everything they have.
I'm doing Lassiter. I'm going to do some Lassiter stuff after this. And yeah, you see just how eager he is for contact. Like he likes swarming around and he likes playing special teams. The other thing about that is D'Amico gave a similar answer in a San Francisco press conference. Back when I was stumping for D'Amico and trying to convince everybody that A, he would want to come here, and B, that the Texans would want him despite the lawsuit from way back when and everything. But his theme has always been like, if you have the right kind of guys, you don't have to talk a lot about motivating. You don't have to badger them to play hard. You don't have to do anything. You set a standard. And if you got the right kind of guys on the team, they see around them what the standard is. And then Nick, we'll show this later, on Friday night kind of said the same thing too. It's kind of a badass moment for Nick. He's just like, these guys know what's expected of them. They know. And if they don't, then the other guys are looking at me, Nick Caserio, and wondering like, what the hell is this guy doing here? It almost becomes self-policing. Like when you have guys, that's why I freaking love Will Anderson so much, because Will, like just on the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, I love CJ too, but on the defensive side of the ball, like Will has zero abashedness about talking about what the standard is and expecting other guys, without being a hard ass about it. But like that's those self-policed teams where the guys like the Ravens have been like this forever. You just got a certain standard and guys know whether they fit in or not. And guys like to fit in. We're just, we're social creatures. We're herd animals.
Nick, kind of piggybacking off of Chrissy's question with the guys who are veteran players because of the COVID-19 eligibility waiver, is it a case-by-case study where you don't want to say we're giving them this amount of time to see where they can improve, or is it you have a certain timeline to where you want them to be able to figure it out, or you have to move on to the next pick?
Yeah. You have to treat each player as their own entity, and they're at different stages in terms of their development. I think from our perspective, their ground zero is once they walk in our building. So regardless of their level of experience, regardless of what's happened previously, when they walk in the door in 2 weeks, that's really year zero. So now then we have the opportunity to evaluate them, and every player has a different stage or different timetable relative to their development. But I would say by the time we get through sort of one cycle, rookie mini camp, spring, training camp, full season, go through an off season, we'll probably hopefully have a decent idea of where that player's arc may be. Now, if they have something that slowed their progress, which we've had a few players who kind of have lost a year, whether it was Mechie, whether it's Dylan kind of coming back from it. So it's always case by case. It's always individual. But as far as the Texans are concerned, we're respectful of what's happened in the past. But really, their clock starts once they walk in our building, and then we'll see how far along we could take them with their development.
So a couple things there. One is talking about the development, and one of you earlier mentioned like that good coaching helped out Stroud as well. Yeah, good coaching helped him to be successful. Remember, there was that report last year before the draft that CJ was hard to coach. I still get retroactively angry about that once every couple months. Sometimes guys are hard to coach because their coaches suck, and I don't think that was obviously CJ's coaches in college were just fine. But it was just BS smoke. But yeah, I think the fact that Bobby Slowick and CJ are very much on the same page, and like those guys, I think they both, because I've heard this about Bobby Slowick. Like Bobby, you're not going to hurt Bobby Slowick's feelings, Like there's no part of Bobby Slowick that all of a sudden wonders like, how come that player gave me looked angry at me or something? Like he's just not that way. And in the same way that CJ can be very blunt at times, like he always cushions it a little bit, calls you fam ahead of time if he's talking to Micah Parsons, but like those two are just simpatico, and that I think they're just all about ball, and it works really well together. As far as how that translates to developing a quarterback, the thing that's really cool about the Texans that I've noticed, especially with CJ, but in other areas, is it's almost like they have a syllabus. Like they've got steps that they want to see you progress to, and each step along the way, you can kind of like what you got to work on next, which is not. That might sound simple enough, but that's not the standard thing in the NFL. There's a weird dynamic sometimes in the NFL where, because there's always that underlying future contract negotiation that sometimes you don't like. I never once in 10 years felt like I got an honest appraisal of where I was as a player and like specifically what I needed to do to get better. Cause I think some teams look at it almost like, well, it's a, we want to be sure that you don't want to give them any information for negotiating or whatever. I don't know. It's weird. It's really, really weird. I don't think they worry about that with the Texans. And it's really cool. So I know Ted Johnson used to say the same thing, and he played in New England his whole career with Belichick. The other part was I was glad that D'Amico mentioned, or excuse me, that Nick mentioned Mechie, because the big question is, Mechie, A, just beat cancer last year. B, was recovering from an ACL when he beat cancer. And then C, and this is something I know nothing about, is like, I don't know with leukemia, lymphoma, like exactly when it may have started affecting John Mechie, and his, like, could it have been present and affecting him his last year in college? I don't know. I have no idea. It's a lot, and it's individual to each different guy. Andre Hale came back very quickly, whereas David Quesenberry took several years before he was a starter. So I think the main crux of it is that I don't think that Nick feels comfortable really rushing to judgment on John Mechie. For whatever it's worth, they didn't draft a wide receiver, but they also have 3 stud wide receivers right now.
We'll go with Sarge and DJ last.
Go ahead, DJ. All right, cool. Amigo, you've received the call when you've gotten drafted, Nick. Obviously, you've called players when they've gotten drafted. You've obviously been in the room watching other people call players when they've gotten drafted. What's that moment like when you can tell a player that, hey, you're about to be a Texan? What's that moment like when you hear the emotion, things of that nature? Just take us into that, and like, what is that like to basically help somebody reach their dream?
Yeah, as you can imagine, it's a moment of you talk about excitement. You talk about that their dream is finally here, right? And they're getting the call. So it's kind of hectic making some of these calls because there's so much noise going on in the background. You can hardly talk to the player, and they're full of excitement, and they're just, so happy to finally get that call. So it's an exciting moment. It's one that it's different for every individual, and it's definitely to make that call, to be on that side, to make the call, to tell a kid that their dream is coming true of playing in the NFL. I'm definitely grateful to be in this position to make those calls.
Marcus Harris, the 7th round pick. He had a good one last night. I put the video I did last night. If you want to click it, 3 hours from now when I finish this thing, he had a really good call. Like I didn't get D'Amico's side of it. This is from an Alabama TV station. But he said, I love you, coach, which the best thing about D'Amico is I feel like players can talk to him without that kind of invisible wall that there is sometimes between football coaches and their players. Because as a football player, a lot of times you're just nervous about when's the next moment I'm going to get yelled at. You don't get that sense with D'Amico. You might worry that he would just, tackle you or something in a friendly way.
Sarge?
I know that after the season, you have to go through the process of, Senior Bowl, pro days, combine, draft. How excited are both of you all just to get back to finally doing football? I know this is football. I understand that.
Didn't D'Amico have a kid recently? Or was that last offseason?
But just to start getting back to putting things on the field, heading towards the rookie mini camp and the OTAs and training camp and things like that.
Yeah, I'm excited to take my scouting cap off now and finally start coaching a little bit. So I'm just in the office, just locked in, just watching as many guys as I can, studying as much tape as I can when it comes to scouting all these players. So I know, who we're looking at, know what we're getting. And so, yeah, I'm excited that we got the guys we got, and we're moving forward. Now we can get on the field, get outside. That's what I'm excited about, getting outside, right, getting some sun and coaching on the grass. That's what I'm definitely looking forward to that moment.
So coaching on grass is the best way to coach. It's just everything's just cool. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, kids back in the day, they used to call marijuana grass. So who was on here? Mr. Robot. I saw Mr. Robot. Mr. Robot does a lot of work. I feel like Mr. Robot is, let's see, I knew which guys to scout in the draft based off of their playing style. Kamari Lassiter was tops of my list. Funny how that worked out. Yeah, I know just from Mr. Robot, I know from your comments that that you watch a lot. I do think I think for a lot of coaches like D'Amico especially, really just wants to be out coaching. The hardest part for me when I do anything pre-draft, and like this year I just mostly did defensive tackles, it's that I just know how much of it's wasted with the draft. Like you could watch 300 guys, and in any given year, only 50 to 75 of them are going to end up really mattering. That's the part that drives me nuts. Now, as a coach, you can tell yourself, okay, we're going to see these guys again. I'm going to play against these guys. They might be free agents off in the future. Not to mention just getting more knowledgeable about it. But when you're a coach, it's like if you're an aircraft mechanic and all of a sudden you got to go spend 2 months doing tractor mechanics, it's a nice challenge and everything, but ultimately you feel like you're not doing what you're meant to do, or vice versa. I'm not biased against tractors or anything. And plus they don't let you work on your own tractors anymore. The new tractors, it's a big whole thing. The farmers like working on their own damn tractors, but now it's like the thing shuts down. It's got it sends via satellite back to the manufacturer what's wrong, and then you got to pay. We'll talk about it with Cade Stover.
Fall season starts Monday. So we'll be on the field with the players, phase 2, so kind of transition to that. So the scouting hat, he'll put it on my head full time. So if there's any players that are still out there, then that'll be my responsibility to make sure we get them in the building. So, but it's all exciting. I think we take a lot of joy in each aspect because it's an ongoing thing. It's really a 365. I mean, that's what it is. It's year round. It doesn't really stop. I mean, okay, the draft's over for this year. Now we kind of transition to a different phase. But our scouts will start to prepare for the 25 draft. We'll start the spring scouting process. We'll take a little bit of break, but we'll kind of transition. And there's a pool of players that we've probably evaluated already who chose to come back to school, that are going to be eligible for next year's draft that we're pretty far down the road on. So then it's the next batch of players. So it's ongoing. But, I mean, he tells me all the time, just take a deep breath and relax. So at some point I'll heed his advice and do it. But, no, we're excited with where the team is and excited with the players that are going to come in here in a few weeks. And it's football season. I know it's baseball season, which I know everybody's miserable all of a sudden, but it's football season for us. So,
Not after yesterday. Yesterday, everything's back on track. You just go to a trip to Mexico City cures everything. They're hitting it out of the park down there. Did you guys notice that stadium too? I asked this question on Twitter, and I don't know if it was a stupid question or not. That stadium in Mexico, it's got just as many outfield seats as it does infield seats. And I was just wondering if it was specifically designed that way because of the altitude and because there's so many home run balls, or if it was just that they didn't want to build too much of an extra deck. I don't know. But the other part of it too, just to give you some scope of this, because this is what I tell myself every single year when I if I think maybe I'll be a draft guy. If you scout 240 players, if you only spent an hour on each one of those players, which is not enough, but if you spend an hour on each one of those players, that's 6 full work weeks, that's 6 40-hour work weeks just on scouting dudes. And that's not enough. It's astounding how much these guys know and remember. I mean, obviously Nick gets paid to do it. I'm talking about the amateurs. It's crazy that these people put that much energy into it. It's very impressive.
Good. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys. All right. I'm going to do Lassiter here in a minute, which I'm excited about. Let's see. Why is that not working? You guys are active today. Senior Larry. Oh, you're responding to somebody. Yeah. You guys were talking about that score that teams use. There's it's interesting okay, so I'm just talking about how much resources how many resources go into scouting these guys. And now this is where as a GM you got to really lean obviously on your regional scouts and everybody else to create a process to where Nick doesn't have to be holed up for 19 hours a day. But I know the Bengals are still. The Bengals are outsourced. I think there's rumors for a long time that the Bengals just used a couple different scores from scouting agencies. They would only have their coaches go out. When I was a senior, I worked out for Tim Crumry, the old defensive lineman who got his leg torn apart in the Super Bowl for the Bengals. But he was their defensive line coach, and he was the guy that'd have to go out and do basically all of the work that other teams would have their scouts do. It was really cool for me because he taught me a lot. He gave me a lot of good lessons right off the bat. But yeah, it is now with all the data that's available. I think it's teams. Nick, you'll appreciate this, Mr. Robot. Nick, I can't remember if Nick told us this on air or not. I think he told us off air, but it's not like off the record or anything. But I was asking him about, the S2 scores and stuff like that, and just the different things that you can sign up for. And he said one of the big things in trying to figure out what other teams do is like, okay, like the S2 test. The Texans don't use the S2 test. There are only 2 teams per division can use it. I think that's the way the S2 company, who I'm guessing took a bit of a hit this last year with CJ doing so well. They create scarcity that way by only allowing 2 teams per division. So the Texans might not use it, but they know that, like, say the Panthers use it. So if they're thinking about like, okay, well, they really like this, Dave Tepper really likes the S2, and Bryce Young really nailed the S2, and CJ sucked at it. So yeah, maybe we don't need to trade up to number 1. I don't know. That's all. So there's scouting, the scouts, and the scouting services they use. When did he throw shade at the Astros? Other than, like, he acknowledged that they're not doing well. He just said that people are miserable as far as I don't think he threw shade. I don't think he threw shade. He was just acknowledging what it was. The worst was when, this was very uncomfortable, and a lot of you have heard this story before from various people in sports media because a lot of us were there. But it was at the Texans kickoff luncheon. And I can't remember which year it was. I said Meltzer and I were still together. So whatever year it was. Oh, it was right after. Oh, it was 2018 because it was right after the World Series, I think. So O'Brien gets up to speak in front of all these, people that pay good money to be there, plus all the, you got a couple players sitting at each table and everything. Very nice affair. But the Astros, the Texans invited a bunch of the Astros there. And I can't remember if Jim Crane and Jeff Luhnow were there, which one of them, at least one of them was, and a few of their high-ranking people, they were there. It's nice. Just won a World Series. And O'Brien, just like out of nowhere, says, yes, and we know the Astros have, it's great what they've done, but we know that at its core, Houston is a football town, and football is what matters. Everybody's looking around like, what the hell is going on here? Like, are you seriously? Why? Why are you even doing that? How are you creating this? Why are you creating a competition that doesn't need to exist? But once it does exist, you're clearly going to lose. I don't know, man. It's just the weird things that some football coaches do. My God. It was uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable. I couldn't make eye contact with Jim Crane for like 6 months. It's like the way you can't make eye contact with your doctor after your prostate exam. That's exactly how it felt. Like Bill O'Brien gave me a prostate exam right in front of Jim Crane. And it wasn't a dream this time. Kamari Lassiter. Kamari Lassiter. Let's take a look at Kamari Lassiter. Let's see. Rumor has it that when Bill O'Brien was shouting, "You suck too, MF," or "You suck too," that he was yelling, "Confirm or deny." Let's see. Oh, the S2 score. Oh, that CJ purposely failed it. You know what? The S2 people, they had said this last year. They just didn't link it as closely to CJ as now they are when they're trying to backpedal and, make their company look all right. Because they do a lot of business with non-sports teams too. They had pointed out that there were a couple of prospects that just either because of travel or because of whether they got in late and then had to take the test early in the morning, that they weren't considered valid results. And yet, if it's not a valid result, then you don't. It's like if somebody declares a pregnancy test invalid, do you still go around telling people like, "Oh, I got a positive test. I got a positive test"? No, but they sure as hell were shouting from the rooftop, or allowing people to shout from the rooftops about how dumb CJ must be. Now I'm retroactively angry about that too. The pre-draft smoke. Let's see. All right, one more. We need that Cowboys versus Texans Thanksgiving game. CJ and Mike have unfinished business after All-Star weekend. They've got a lot going. They've got, if you haven't seen it, there's a good clip from the draft night show that they did on Thursday night where they got into a debate about whether the AFC North was better than the NFC East. Micah Parsons was making a claim. He kept walking it back, saying that, no, the NFC East was predicted to be the best team in football last year. And CJ's like, what the hell are you talking about? Just because they'd all been in the playoffs. Let's see. Texas Turkey Bowl every year. Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. That'd be pretty cool. I try not to get too worked up about it. Let me get this Kamari Lassiter stuff set up. Just bear with me for a second while the producer that I haven't hired yet didn't show up again today. All right. Kamari Lassiter, second-round pick to the Texans, who played at Georgia and is a guy who plays with his hair on fire, embodies the swarm mentality, all of that good stuff. Let's get to know him a little bit. We'll watch a little film, listen to some press conferences, and Nick talk about him. And I want to show you at the end of this a few of the things that he needs to work on. But this is a very smart football player who's very disciplined, plays with a lot of passion, a lot of fire, not afraid to get physical, can play press, can play man. Probably maybe is at his best when he's off ball, which is fine in this defense. But the biggest thing that jumps out is that when he is covering man, like he gets in the hip pocket of the receiver and then has a really good awareness of when to turn for the ball, like reading the eyes of the receiver. You try to throw a back shoulder to him. He's like, try another back shoulder to him. He has doesn't actually come away with the ball a lot. Like he catches with the back of his hands on the back shoulder fade. But then this too, like swarm mentality will come up. And this is what I worry about him. This concussion protocol celebration that he has. I saw this about 19 times after big plays. But a very excitable, like D'Amico Ryans type of guy. This is him talking about on this call right after the draft about how excited he is to come to Houston.
Man, I've been saying for a long time, I was like, man, I really want to go to Houston. And I was just, saying it, very slightly, not knowing that, it was going to come true. And I got the call earlier. And
yeah, so, and then this is him talking about D'Amico Ryans.
Yes, sir. But playing for Coach Ryans, I feel like it'll be great. I was best player on Coach Martin. He's a very heavily defensive-minded guy, so I feel like, it's going to be a pretty good transition. But I'm excited, get in there and learn up under Coach Ryans.
And now he's looking down at his lock. I think Sarge asked about his lock, and we'll get into that in a little bit. He explains exactly what that gigantic master lock around his neck is. I don't think it's master lock, but it's a big old lock. The big thing that stuck out to me is the guys who have talked about D'Amico before they've even met D'Amico. Now, like obviously Lassiter has met D'Amico, but just the appeal that D'Amico has, I think, in A, word of mouth from other players, but B, I think when they watch football and they see D'Amico on the sidelines, or certainly like when they were watching that playoff game, if they watch them mic'd up, a few of you had pointed this out a while back, that mic'd up where D'Amico explains to Christian Harris exactly how he was going to get a pick six and like how to stem his alignment and dupe Joe Flacco, and then Christian Harris in the next series goes out and gets a pick six. Like that's the kind of stuff that players see. And like Tony Dungy had always said, and Dick Duran used to tell me this too. Like ultimately what players want is information. You can deliver it to them by screaming at them. You can deliver it to them by talking gently to them. But like ultimately, if they want you to make them better. And like, I think people look at D'Amico as a guy that like, okay, this guy, they like, A, yeah, he seems like an awesome guy, but B, he's going to make me better. And especially for linebackers and defensive backs, I think some of the stuff we saw towards the end of last season, the Texans started to get a little bit more complex in disguising coverages, rotating coverage after the snap. That's what helped so much in that Browns game, was that A, they did it and did it effectively, but B, there really wasn't a lot of film on it either. So they duped Flacco into a lot of old Flacco things by, I think, giving him a false sense of confidence in what he was seeing. Because earlier in the season, the Texans, like a lot of quarterbacks could diagnose what the Texans defense was doing at the snap because they were making so many mental errors that D'Amico had to keep things somewhat vanilla. Things finally started to click in some ways there towards the end of the year. It helped that Derek Stingley was able to track Amari Cooper all over the field too. Next question. This is Caserio in his initial statement on Lassiter himself. There we go.
Lassiter is position flex. He's played in the perimeter of the formation. He's played inside the formation. I'd say he plays with a linebacker type mentality. I mean, he's a corner, but he tackles, he's tough, he's physical. I'm sure there'll be a question about his speed and how fast he ran, but he's not slow. We're drafting football players. We're not drafting track teams. When you watch him play in the SEC, you don't walk away and have that concern.
Yes, but this is, by the way, I cut all of Casario's down answers in this press conference down to 30 seconds or less. It took me 2 hours. When Casario is with D'Amico, it's different. It's like, oh, okay, you're in a room with somebody and you only talk for so long. I think when he's up solo or like when he's on the phone with us sometimes, he just kind of, it's a stream of consciousness. And I know a lot of people think he's filibustering. I think he just wants to be very thorough when it's just him talking. So it took me 2 hours to cut down 8 answers to 30 seconds or less so we can play those on Monday for you on the radio. But I think one of the big things is the way that he was coached at Georgia and the way Kirby does things. Kind of like at Alabama, they expect a lot of their defensive backs. They coach their technique up really well. So whatever his 40 time is, it's the same way with linebackers. The game speed varies based on how many false steps is a guy taking, how often is he misdiagnosing or diagnosing correctly, all those things. And Lassiter shows a lot of aptitude for the stuff that gets you to the ball faster. Sometimes he gets a little aggressive with it. Sometimes he gets a little too confident in his ability to anticipate routes. And I'll show you a couple of those at the end. But the upside there is very much there. This is him. This is Casario talking about the coaching at Georgia.
He's well coached. I say Kirby's as good of a coach, and probably, him and Coach Saban are probably good as secondary coaches from a technique standpoint, how they play the ball. He played a lot on the line of scrimmage. You play a lot of press. We have a little bit more flexibility in our coverages. So maybe some of the things that we are going to ask him to do are conducive to his skill set.
Yeah. So I think in terms of just some of the things the Texans do, we talked when they're in match coverage, when you're off ball and your ability to recognize really allows you to get a jump on routes. And like, there's a lot of times when you watch him play that he's kind of like intercepting the route. And, I'm not saying running the, running the route for the receiver. It's a lot of the football IQ stuff that really flashes. And I think that definitely appeals to D'Amico. This is, the swarm mentality. I think Sarge asked him this question about the swarm mentality and how important it was after night one for all three of those players.
Yes, Sarge. Honestly, that's a huge part of it. I would say Lassiter, this is like no question about it. This is like hands down. So it's actually a huge part of the calculus. And I think our players understand that as well. So when a player comes in the building, they know, they're aware. So are we consistent with our messaging? Are we doing what we say? Are we doing what we believe in? Are we espousing our philosophy at all levels? They know.
I like that. They know. Hey, that's badass Nick right there. I feel like, and D'Amico has said the same thing. Like, okay, like there's a certain standard. And if you have enough of the guys that have that standard, you don't really have to talk about it all that much. It's just like, oh, this is what you do. D'Amico talked about that in San Francisco. And you know how physical that defense has been, almost to the point where I feel like Lassiter, much like a lot of the guys that played for San Francisco, is a guy that I'm not even joking when I say this. I sometimes worry about these guys hurting themselves by being so kamikaze. You remember Kevin Johnson was that way? He wasn't built like Lassiter, but Kevin Johnson was that way. Like, God bless him. He was too ballsy for his own good. He had a Byrd frame, but he would go in there like a rhinoceros, just with his head down, and he got injured a lot. So Lassiter is built better, and I think just with all the emphasis on proper tackling now too, I say going in head first. Obviously, you can't go in head first anymore. Although the Texans did have 2 of the 3 players who were suspended for unsportsmanlike conduct last year in the league on the team at one given time. Kareem Jackson didn't get it. Was Denzel Perryman and Kareem Jackson, who didn't get suspended while he was with the Texans, but we brought him in after the suspension, and then some other guy somewhere. He's of no consequence to us. So this is Lassiter talking about getting the call.
And it was just surreal. You dream about having that call your whole life. And my phone disconnected. I had bad service, so I hung up right in the middle of the phase. But man, whenever I got a call back and it was the fifth drop, man, it was just a wave of emotion. See my mom, my grandma, my pops, all my family here, and just seeing everybody just be so happy. it's something that, I'll never forget.
I don't know where he was, but you can see there in the back, there's a fire alarm in the background. So it's some kind of facility or institution. I assume that wasn't, I was assuming they don't have that fire alarm in his house. It's funny when you have to take those questions. Guys are doing all this media right afterwards. The family's going crazy and everything. So I like seeing when they had to duck out somewhere. Sometimes you can tell they're like in a spare bedroom or something, or in the laundry room in their house. I also I'm glad that he's going to be able to hopefully get his parents better Wi-Fi coverage, or wherever they are. He's from. Did he move from? I think he said they moved away from Savannah. I don't know. Savannah can be backwards in some ways, so maybe it's just in Savannah they don't have good Wi-Fi or good cell phone coverage there. Next question for Kamari Lassiter. Oh, he's just asked about C.J. Stroud.
I'll put it like this: C.J. Stroud gave us hell in the Peach Bowl.
Remember he goes to Georgia.
I don't remember him. I don't remember too many passes hitting the ground. And that was one of the few games that we really just didn't really have a true answer for the quarterback. So that's one thing that I vividly remember my sophomore year. We scraped out of there barely.
Yeah, we squeaked out of there barely. The question should have been like, hey, does it feel like you personally helped C.J. Stroud get drafted higher? I mean, they won that game, so it wouldn't be that sensitive of a topic. And obviously, he wouldn't have been as integrally involved with all those other studs they had on the defense at the time. But that was, I think the one fun thing about having all these guys from Power 5 schools, and then a lot of them from the better Power 5 schools, is that they can kind of probably get together and compare notes on what was like during that game and everything. And like CJ's got so much respect from other players in a way that, when we asked Bullock about it after he got drafted at the draft show, we had him on the phone. And I mean, CJ was just drafted last year, but Bullock was talking about CJ almost, it sounded like an older brother, like an older, like an uncle or something, and the advice that CJ's given him. Said CJ gave him advice about staying I don't want to phrase it incorrectly, but basically just about his faith and, keeping strong with his relationship with God and all that. As you would expect, that's obviously very heavily part of CJ's core being. He was asked about that heavy lock he's asked a couple times about the heavy lock, but here's his explanation.
So the way I had it made, my pops actually designed it for me. He actually had the idea made. He was like, you should get a lock. You call yourself the locksmith. So it's a lock, and the only person who got a key is me. So the key goes inside of the the little right there. So I'm the only person who has a key to this lock. That's why I got it on lock.
It sounds like a chastity belt. It's like a chastity belt, but for something. Never mind. But doesn't it look like a chastity belt? Like those old pictures of the medieval. If you don't know what a chastity belt is, look it up and ask why the hell I thought to reference a chastity belt. I like that. I don't know if is he going to wear it all the time. Honestly, it's too big. And this is not. I feel like I'm cool with oversized jewelry and everything. Maybe it's you know what it is? It's a camera angle, because I remember him sitting on the couch and it didn't look that big. I worry about these guys' necks and their heads with concussions. So. Oh, yeah. Oh, that was the other thing. Remember that Dan Matthews had told me about him just flat out not coming off the field. So aside from just being good at football, he is very much committed to playing special teams, doesn't want to come off the field. I remember like Micah Parsons in the preseason a few years ago. That's where I kind of, against my own better judgment, I started to like Micah Parsons, even though he was a Cowboy, because I could tell on Hard Knocks that he just loved playing football. Like, he couldn't understand why he wasn't allowed to play in the third quarter of a football game in the preseason. Like, I just want to play football. You got to, that's the kind of crap that D'Amico absolutely loves, obviously. Few areas. I think I only added 3 plays on here, followed by some highlights for areas for improvement. If you look, here he is up top. You're going to love the way he comes up and wants contact, but you don't like this leverage where his job here as the cornerback is to turn the play inside. Ideally, turn it inside and make the play as well. But you see all those guys in orange helmets that are running, that if he just turns it back, the play's dead in the water. Sometimes he's so kamikaze that he ends up missing. Anticipating, I think this one was a little bit of got a little cocky about where this route was going, right? And every now and then you catch him doing that. not like it's a plague on his game or anything. Press coverage at times, again, sometimes his aggressiveness gets the better of him. And here he is up top. I think we're back to highlights now. I gave you 3 little areas for improvement. 4 little areas of improvement. This is the other thing. He gets handsy. Like as you expect, and you can get away with it in college more. But he does have a tendency to reach out and grab instead of relying on his feet to recover. But none of it is anything that I would be overly worried about. When it comes to the football IQ side of things, if I remember correctly, he was at the line on this one and then backed off, almost baiting the rocket screen, and then good anticipation there. Like that's understanding situation tendencies. He'd seen that on film before, and he's like just inviting the quarterback. Yes, please, come and play. And just a little bit of the old break it up the ball. I think we get a little ultra violence here. There we go. Ultra violence. That's not his most ultra violent play, but he's not afraid of ultra violence. So very excited about Kamari Lassiter. And I'll be honest, he wasn't a guy I spent a whole bunch of time watching or learning about before Friday night. But you very much get the sense after you see him, listen to him a little bit, hear what his coaches say about him, that the guy's the real deal. One of the scouts on Lance Zerline's write-up for him, he said the ball production is pretty so-so, but I think some of that was just how Georgia handled their coverage. He's tough, played hard, and yeah, that's very much the case. The ball production is something that people will bring up. His 40 time people bring up. I don't know, like watching on film, I don't think the speed's one bit of an issue. I think especially, like his game speed and his comfort. Sometimes when he's playing trail coverage or covering on a 9 route, he can get right in the hip pocket and be able to play the back shoulder, but also be able to play a go route. And like that part of it, I don't worry about at all. So I'm excited about him. It's going to be a genuine competition, though, I think, at cornerback. Let me get some of these comments here. Camaraderie is a breath of fresh air and such an. Oh, you guys are talking about CJ and Micah again. Yeah, it's also easier too because I think whenever CJ and Micah argue, like CJ's a little bit more cerebral, and by a little I mean like quite a bit more cerebral than Micah, and so it's more fun when you can watch your guy get the better of the other guy, I would say. Let's see. Oh, no problem, Mr. Robot. No, you've made, Mr. Robot, you will challenge me sometimes, and it's one of those things where, like, when you get a little angry and then you realize, like, oh, wait a second, am I getting angry because he might be right? Okay, I better sit back and think. And then a lot of times, oh yeah, Mr. Robot was correct about what he said. That's my advice to you kids. If somebody isn't directly attacking you, or if somebody says something and you get angry or pissed off, don't worry. It only took me 45 years to learn this. First examine, like, wait a second, are they genuinely insulting me, or are they actually just saying something that threatens what I believe, and I'm not equipped to argue back because maybe I don't know what I think I know as well as I know it. It helps a lot. And then you just try to separate, even if they actually are insulting you, just try to separate yourself from it and say, like, okay, well, wait a second. Like, I wish he hadn't called me a D-bag, but he also maybe makes a good point, so I'll let it go. He can't catch for yeah, but when people line up against him, none of them catch anything either. Must be contagious. Yeah, he's it's one of those little things that, like, sometimes guys play defensive back for a reason, and you live with it. That's he plays defensive back for a reason, and I don't need him to be. Well, let Derek Stingley's ball skills. My God, not that. Yeah, I mean, you'd love to have two guys that have the same ball skills as Derek Stingley. I got all super organized here by printing everything out. Now it's blowing up in my face. Blake Fisher. My God, Blake Fisher. Here we go with Blake Fisher. My co-host Sean Pendergast was super amped up that the Texans drafted a Notre Dame offensive lineman. Like, played wherever Joe Alt didn't play. We say that he played left tackle, he played right tackle, but Joe Alt is the big shimmering mountain of a man that everybody was in love with. So Blake Fisher ends up playing right tackle. Tall, lanky guy, 6'6" plus, but not overly big. It looks looks, I can't remember. I estimated at 310. I know his combine weight, it might be a little bit heavier than that, but he's a lanky guy who actually looks taller than he actually is because he's kind of lanky. So I think there's upside here with Blake Fisher. But just to get a sense, just a few plays, if you watch him at right tackle, this first one, watch his hands. He's like a kung fu master on this play. I really admire guys, offensive tackles, who can chop, stayed in perfect position the entire time. Like, for a big guy, moves his feet really well. The tall, lanky guys, sometimes guys can get up underneath them and exploit them. We're going to see a little bit of that at the end of this. But for the most part, right, like there with his left hand was really strong. For some reason, when I was finding some of these clips, it was like on a play where he had a good snap, but his quarterback got sacked by somebody else's fault. Nice wide base. Even here, where he's got a tendency to get beat inside sometimes, but here he does a good job of riding the guy through the inside of the pocket as one of his teammates lets him down. Run game. This is where John Harris gets excited, I think, is A, athletic enough to pull and take on guys in space, but also B, he's got a little bit of the taste for this player. He'll finish people. Like, he'll ride them to the ground. This one too, he wants to root people out, and actually does show an ability to get up underneath shorter guys than him. And that's a big thing, because I'm going to show you a couple clips later where, as a taller, lankier guy, guys get up underneath him at times and he loses all his power, plays kind of straight-legged. It's hard to tell who's going to be able to fix that and who isn't. The fact that he is able to get low and sink his hips with a flat back in the run game is an indicator that he might really be able to learn how to play lower. A lot of times in pass protection, especially, these taller guys in college, they get away with playing high, like with a high pad level, because they don't get tested nearly as much. It's funny because a lot of those guys, some of them figure it out like in the first 2 weeks of camp. And that's when it's really cool to see, is to watch, all right, day one, he's getting kind of rode up out of there. But then all of a sudden they figure it out. Some other guys, it takes a year or 2 or 3. And some of it comes down to physical maturity, getting in the weight room, all of that. Like Charlie Heck was a guy that when he first got to the Texans, I think he was just physically immature. And I don't think that that's an issue with Fisher. So I think it's more of one of technique and competition. Press conference. All of these obviously are. He was in Houston the next day after the draft, but they did the press conference on the Zoom immediately afterwards. Blake Fisher. Press conference. How would you describe your game?
Yeah, my game just dominant. Always looking to find work. Always looking to find ways to help the boys next to me, the guys next to me, and then on top of that, just finish. I think that's the biggest thing, is just finishing.
And that's something on it. That was in John Harris's comments too, was that he likes to finish. He's got that taste for the more aggressive side. Ultraviolence, I know that one of you guys Ultraviolence is just a Clockwork Orange reference. So I watched a Clockwork Orange not that long ago. But ultraviolence in general, like football ultraviolence, not violence, but the football ultraviolence. Don't get too finicky about this stuff. Don't be pristine. None of us are virgins here. Next question. Did you know the Texans were interested in you, and how do you feel about playing with Tunsil and Howard? And honestly, some of these guys, when they get drafted, I don't know if he knows what the Texans situation is at offensive tackle. Like he might have zero clue a few minutes after the draft. They've already got 2 really highly paid offensive tackles on the line.
For sure. I would definitely say, I met with them during the combine, had a formal visit with them. And then I would say, I had a couple of Zooms with them. But didn't know the interest was this high. But, love this opportunity, especially being able to be, back with, one of my OGs from, college, Jared Patterson. And, then, young and up growing team, just being able to contribute, just bring, what I bring to the game, to this program.
Yeah, so sorry, I cut you off there, Blake Fisher, a little bit. The other thing I'm getting is like he didn't really realize that the Texans were that high on him. You compare that to to Xavier Leggett, who flat out told the world that the Panthers were probably going to draft him. Honestly, oh, those poor bastards probably heard about that from Dave Tepper. Like Dave Tepper. Like, why are you telling draft picks what your intentions are exactly before the draft? CJ last year didn't have a clue. CJ thought the Texans didn't like him. CJ said CJ didn't know where he was going until the Texans drafted him. He thought he might go anywhere in the top 9. So like CJ thought the Texans didn't like him. I think he probably maybe knew a little bit about the David Mulligetta history and experience with the Texans as well. And maybe they wondered, like I think Mulligetta wondered whether the Texans liked him. I think honestly, we forget that there were valid questions as to whether the Texans would take a Mulligetta client because of the history with Deshaun. Remember, not just the Deshaun allegations, but Deshaun requesting a trade before any of the allegations were even public. So like that part's all water under the bridge, but they do a really good job of keeping it close to the vest. Nick, then he was asked, why did you think that the Texans' interest wasn't that high?
Organization.
It's coming.
They kind of hit it, you know what I mean? Like, like when you can kind of tell, when you kind of sense like, okay, like this team could be in the play. But I really didn't get any signs from them. I had a quick Zoom with them, a couple weeks ago, and that was it. And then form out the combine, I haven't heard anything else really. So to kind of know that there was a team, interested, in me, kind of, under the rug, if you will, is a blessing. A blessing for sure. Let me know that somebody believes in me and believes that I can be a big contribution to to the group.
I don't know about under the rug as a phrase. Except you know what, Will Anderson has done that, because like Will Anderson took a phrase that might be typically a negative one where he said Houston ain't for everybody. Like usually when you say he's not for everybody, it's a little bit of a subtle passive aggressive shade at somebody. Like Will Anderson has said like, no, Houston's not for everybody. You got to be wired a certain way to come play here. He just put it out there. He told that to guys at the Pro Bowl. Pro Bowlers were talking to Will about like wanting to play for the Texans, and Will's like, I don't know if you're good enough. I don't know if you're Texans worthy. So likewise, keeping things under the rug. Yeah, we know what you're saying, Blake Fisher. Blake Fisher, offensive tackle, second rounder for the Texans. This is Caserio in his first opening statement on Blake Fisher.
Good football player. Started his career at left tackle. Moved over there to right tackle when all moved to left tackle. So I think we've always been a big believer you can't have enough tackles on your football teams. You need 3 or 4 tackles that you feel can go out there and play. You all have seen us play. At some point, they're going to have to play. Even going back to 22, we had to play multiple tackles. Once we picked Blake, I don't know how many offensive linemen went after that, but it was close to double digits. I don't have the exact count, but it might have been 6 or 8.
Yeah, so, Nick always talks about bands of players and trying to get into a spot where you feel good about where you are. I think with defensive tackles, they missed out on that band of players. 4 defensive tackles went in 5 consecutive picks. There were 4 defensive tackles taken. And then when the Texans took Lassiter, 2 cornerbacks had gone immediately. 2 teams jumped up to get 2 cornerbacks right before Lassiter. Maybe with offensive tackles, compared to like the number of guys that they had available, I think probably by that point, by the time they got to Fisher, they might have been thinking like, all right, well, look, we've got a guy right here. We weren't really planning. Like, I know best player available, et cetera, et cetera. I think that he didn't want to dick around and end up like being stuck way far out of a band or anything. And he just wanted to take the best guy available. Everything he said about needing 3 offensive tackles is true. I do wonder what it means for Charlie Heck. But you saw last year. I mean, George Fant goes off and gets a nice contract here in free agency. It would have been nice to retain George Fant, but it's a hell of a lot cheaper to retain a Blake Fisher on a rookie contract for a few years. This is Blake Fisher on his impression of the Texans initially.
Great coaching staff. They love ball. On top of loving ball, they just really love their players. Players, coaches. Really want their players to be successful and want to find all the ways that they can help their players be successful.
Yeah, I think that part too, just the love ball part. Like the coaches, the Texans coaching staff, It's honestly, it's one that I'm a little bit jealous of the players that get to play for that staff, because I think D'Amico sets a tone for, like, not just, I don't want to say easygoing is not the right word, but they're just not caught up in, they're not all caught up in the BS that sometimes football coaches fall into, where they think they need to be the movie version of Vince Lombardi or the movie version of a Marine drill instructor or something like that. Like, it's in their head that they're supposed to be a D-bag somehow. So D'Amico is decidedly not that. But I do think too, and this is key, like whether you're a hard edge personality or a soft and fuzzy, warm, loving, hugging personality, like, as long as you're really good at setting the focus towards a common goal and avoiding the distractions as a coach that can get in your way from that or detract from all that, it makes everything else so much easier to handle, and in a job that's inherently stressful because everybody's getting fired all the time, there's usually not really any reason to add on to that stress. So, like, D'Amico, I think, is a guy that's very comfortable allowing guys to remember, like, okay, let's have fun doing this thing. Let's play our butts off, but let's also have fun and not make it any more miserable than it needs to be. And like that goes a long way, man. It goes a long way, because I've seen the opposite side of it, and it's a long season. It's a long season when it doesn't feel that way. Bobby Slowick too. I think when we talk about coaches, like, Bobby Slowick in the run game is the big question this year, and I think that I've talked to enough people, both from San Francisco and here in Houston, that I'm confident that the run game is going to look a lot better this year, if only because they know what the challenges are with Dameon Pierce, right? Where last year they were trying to force the issue with Dameon Pierce. And early on, I wondered, like, why is Dameon the one getting the lion's share of the carries here? And yeah, you know what? I'll pat myself on the back. I'm going to pat myself on the back for two things here. One was, I thought Singletary should have been getting more carries right from the get-go last year. Two, the defensive tackles that went in that band there, I thought they were all relatively interchangeable. So there you go. I win the award. But they wasted a lot of time trying to force the issue with Dameon Pierce. Now you bring in Joe Mixon, who is, as much as I like Devin Singletary for what he is, Joe Mixon is a more of a workhorse back. But then also in getting Chris Strausser, the offensive line, 1 year into the system after he'd never really been in a system like this before, and having the guys, the holdover and now hopefully healthier offensive linemen, it's going to be better. Like, I'm not promising that they're going to be a top 5 rushing team or anything, but I'm going to be really, really surprised if it's not a better rushing attack this year. Like, I'll be incredibly surprised. And that's a hallmark of Shanahan offenses too, is that they get better in the second year, just through reps. Gary Kubiak used to, I remember the first time I started talking to Gary about his offense, because I was curious. Because as a player, I was just quizzing him about it. And really, he really focused on, it's reps. It's reps. You got to get to where because it's also about deception. So the reps are about making everything look this exact same. And you do that by doing it multiple times. And then you can use that to use zone run to set up the bootleg and all that. This is where it gets interesting. Is he interested? What is it? Is he comfortable playing guard? That was the question. Are you comfortable moving inside and playing guard?
I never play inside, but I'm not opposed to being on the inside. I feel like I'm a versatile player. I feel like there's a lot that I can do in my game, left, right tackle. But really, I just want to come in and contribute, wherever that is, left tackle, right guard, left guard. Never played center before, so, if that's what they want, I got it, but, my dog JP's at center, so I think he can hold it down, in there in the middle. But nah, man, I'm excited.
I hadn't caught that the first time. Yeah. Jarrett Patterson is at center, but Juice Scruggs is ahead of him. So he's got this. I don't know if this happens, man. Like Blake Fisher, you're going to hear later how many top 30 visits he took. Like, there's no way guys can know every team in the scenario they're walking into, especially a few minutes after the draft. Like, I don't know if at this point in the call, if he realized that there are already 2 starters penciled in and that he's going to have to compete for that job. Like, Laramie's not losing his job, right? But Titus with a couple years left, and who can play guard, kind of. Like, there might be more of a genuine competition there than people might expect. So, and as Nick alluded to earlier, you need 3 offensive tackles at least. But when he also said, when Blake Fisher said, well, I got to, like, he's willing to do it, but he's never done it before, I started to get nervous because we know this team, going back to O'Brien and their love of offensive linemen who can move all around. Nick Caserio was asked pretty much the same question.
Yeah, Blake's really a tackle. So, I mean, we'll look at, you never want to say, well, we're just going to move a guy inside just because. So the player may be able to handle it, may not be able to handle it. I'd say not just Blake, but generally speaking, not all tackles can just move inside. I think sometimes there's this propensity to move certain players inside if they're a certain size or whatever the case may be. I think Titus is definitely unique. I mean, I'd say, you know, Titus is a better tackle than he is an inside player. I mean, Titus is honestly one of the better tackles, you know, in the league. We always say they're a tackle until they're not.
Yeah, they're tackling until they're not. I was glad to hear that because I just don't – I don't want to see that. I don't want to Xavier Suafilo this or Titus Howard this or do anything that keeps a guy from developing at the position that he's best at because everything's different. The footwork is different. The timing is different. The speed, the power, everything's different inside and outside. And it's not that offensive tackles are generally more athletic and higher paid, but that doesn't mean that because of that, it's simple for them to play guard. They're completely different positions. So I would prefer that not happen. Just to address something that Frank Z said, you said this before Nick had weighed in. I really, just from watching Blake Fisher, from what Nick said and everything else, I'd be very, very surprised if they move him down inside. And as far as LaDarius Henderson, yeah, like he's a guard, but he's a 7th round pick, like as an offensive lineman. So you're not banking on him. Like it'll be an awesome surprise. But yes, just because he played for a national championship team, like by that standard, okay, then then are those guys all 1st round picks? Like, no. So he's in the mix, but there's a lot of competition there already. So I'm hoping that LaDarius Henderson ends up developing, but usually just even if he makes it as a 7th round pick, more often than not, there's going to be some development time there. So I'm not really including him in the conversation just yet. This was the big one. Oh, what lesson prepared you most for this moment? This was from, I think Brandon Scott asked this question, and it's notable, partly notable. Where the hell am I? Oh, okay. Notable because this is something I've heard CJ say.
Yeah, 12:30s.
Oh, that was the question. How many top 30 visits did you have? 12. He went to 12 top 30 visits. So that stresses me out because, man, that's a 36-hour ordeal every single time you do it. Or he was going from one place to another, to another, to another. Like, it's hard to eat right and exercise and do all these other things, knowing that right after the draft, you're going to have to show up and be out doing OTAs and minicamp in the Houston Heat. So I get stressed on behalf of these guys sometimes. I just don't want I put myself in that same situation, and it just seems like it would be absolutely miserable. A few of the coaching points for Blake Fisher. And I really like Blake Fisher a lot, but like every single guy drafted, there's things they need to work on, and there's things he needs to improve. One of them is not pretending that they're the GM and head coach. So let me bring this back a little bit. So right tackle. And you're going to see right there, like sometimes these soft sets, oversets, opens up the inside. That shows up at times. It's not like a huge epidemic or anything. Right tackle here, obviously. This was actually like, he's good getting to the second level. At times, he's not awesome at it. Like, it's an area for improvement, especially when he starts facing NFL caliber talent. But I actually think that his stuff at the second level and as a pulling guard or as a pulling tackle are actually the stuff out in space is one of the more impressive things that he does as a 6'6" guy. But there's also times where he looks like a 6 foot and a 6.5 guy where he gets a little gangly and out over his skis. Some of that can come with maturity and just drilling. Tall, lanky guy. Sometimes guys get up underneath his pads, see some evidence of him getting bull rushed at times. Again, that's no big surprise at all for tall, lanky guys. There was that overset again. And then this is John Harris on draft night. Steph Stradley took this. So I stole this off of Steph Stradley, but that's John Harris to the left. That's Seth Payne to his left. That's Robert Hensley to my left. And then that's Mark Vandermeer, who's leaning in for a picture that he doesn't need to lean in for. But this is him on Fisher.
Watched them last year. I liked Fisher more than I liked Alt. Wow, you were mentioning this last night. I like Fisher more than I liked Alt. I was not a big Alt guy. Now, with Fisher, could he play guard? Is that something you think about? You bring him to camp? Yeah. I like Blake Fisher. He's got finisher tendencies. He wants to put people on the ground. I like that. At Notre Dame, very well coached. I know somewhere Sean Pendergast was dancing at I like Blake Fisher. I was one of the I didn't see his name in his process a lot. So I thought, am I missing something? So I went back in late February and watched him. And I thought, no. This guy is legit. Now, what does he play tackle? Can he play guard? You bump him inside the guard. He's played tackle a lot. I like him out on the edge, but obviously we know what the tackle situation is out there. There's a part of me not really surprised by this pick because I do think he could go into guard, and now your guard competition gets really, really interesting. I mean, look, last year you drafted Juice, and you thought more than likely he's going to play center. He played center at Penn State, felt like a good fit. You know, Texans probably needed a center more than anything else at that point. You had Kenyon Green, you traded for Shaq Mason. Where'd Juice end up? We ended up at guard.
I don't want Fisher at guard. Juice Scruggs is a center. You know, we saw Nick say that a tackle is a tackle until he's not. I feel like Juice Scruggs was a center until he got moved to guard, and then it really looked like he's a center. So I'm cool with Juice Scruggs competing as center. Patterson, I feel good about Patterson doing both. Patterson has kind of the length to be a guard, but also the short area quickness to be a center. So Blake Fisher, though, I'm intrigued by him. I think there's a lot of potential. I think he could end up being really good, but he's also it's not like lack of pressure is a good thing necessarily, but as long as he's motivated enough, he'll probably have some time to get his feet underneath him with, fingers crossed, no injuries to the offensive line, which, by the way, the Texans had the worst total starter games missed to injury in the entire league last year. It's one thing I always have to remind myself when, the Texans started off the season with at various times 3 or 4 backup offensive line playing on the offensive line, that there's a lot of room for improvement just by health. But then the team overall missed so much time with starters due to injury that hopefully that's enough to offset what looks right now like a tougher schedule. So anyway, Blake Fisher, welcome to the Texans. I want to watch the Calen Bullock press conference because I didn't get to see this either. These are both pretty short because Calen Bullock and Cade Stover, who I haven't jumped into to do really like a little film breakdown on yet. Let's watch both of these guys. Let me get a little sheet on Calen Bullock. 6'2", 188. That's the number that I was saying wrong earlier. He's skinny. So Calen Bullock, safety out of the University of Southern California. He's 6'2". He's 188 pounds. Long, lanky drink of water that Nick Caserio says needs to gain some weight. I agree, or at least gain some strength. I don't know if he needs to get any heavier. He needs to gain some strength. He's a very, very willing tackler, but sometimes he just flat out lacks the strength to do some of the things that safeties do. He makes up for it on the back end with his ball tracking ability, his length. There's a chance. I know Jimmy Ward doesn't love playing slot corner, but maybe at times this year, Jimmy Ward or Jalen Petrie are going to go down and play the slot. It gives them a lot more versatility and some competition for Jalen Petrie. So here is, I believe the first question comes from Aaron Wilson to Calen Bullock.
When you visited here, what do you remember about that? Did you get a good feeling about the Texans, that they might be the team that picked you as you went on your trips, and have a follow-up?
When I took the visit to Texas, it felt great. The whole coaching staff, they welcomed me with open arms. Everybody loved me, and I love the coaching staff there too, and everybody else who was on the staff. So I kind of knew, I had a good feeling that it would be a chance that I would go there.
And
he's the guy that a lot of people pointed out. It seemed like D'Amico and Nick were especially happy to land him. And D'Amico, everybody correct me if I'm wrong when I start crossing my stories here. D'Amico had said that Bullock was a guy that they had identified and kind of wondered especially given as you're getting later down into the draft, is this a guy that we might be able to connect with? It seemed like they were both pretty happy that it worked out. Son of a bitch.
You play a ton. How would you describe your style of play and your mentality toward football? Thank you.
I would say I'm a very diverse DB. You're gonna see me playing everywhere. I'm gonna come and give my all to this organization, no matter what. I'm gonna leave everything out there on the field. I'm gonna always come out here every single day. I'm gonna get the best person on and off the field always.
And then to tell his story a little bit, because Nick referenced it, his dad died when he was 10 years old. I think he's one of 4 brothers and 1 sister, and ended up living with his grandma his last for a few years of high school when his mom moved away because he wanted to stay in his high school. From USC, we asked him about CJ Stroud, or from the area too. He grew up like 15 minutes from USC. So we asked him whether he knew CJ Stroud, and he said, yeah, we know. Obviously not on this press conference, but from the radio show. Said that CJ's given him good advice. Seems like he knows CJ pretty well.
Cole.
Congratulations, Cole Thompson, USA Today, Texans Wire. I just want to ask you, when you look back at your time at USC, what would you say was your favorite memory? And also, do you have a favorite highlight interception? Because it was feeling like every other play you were taking the ball back for 15, 20 yards down the field.
Yeah. I would say probably my favorite memory was my very first game of my freshman year. I got to start as a true freshman, go out there and play in front of a lot of people. My emotions was everywhere. I remember me just crying before the game, just couldn't believe it that I got to start in front of everybody. And I went out there and had a really good game. So I think that's really my favorite moment. And then I would say my very first interception, my freshman year versus Washington State. I would say that's one to remember. I remember getting that interception, and it felt good. I called everybody in my family right after the game.
And then a quick follow-up for you. When you look at a guy like DeMeco Ryans, who's been in the NFL, he's been close to league. He recently retired just a few years ago. What does it mean to have a coach that understands what it's like to go through the daily life of an NFL player, and also having a defensive-minded coach, especially for your first head coach to the next level?
Yes, sir. It's great to have a coach like that, especially he relates to the players. Like you said, he was a former player also, so he knows what it takes. He knows what us players go through. So he's going to be able to relate to us, and I know he's a really awesome coach. So
yeah, and I think honestly, he needs coaching in USC. I don't want to blame the coach. USC, not a good defense whatsoever. There's mistakes that he makes that I think are very, very, very correctable. Because he does a lot of the intelligence stuff really well, like the pattern matching and everything else. There's times where I think, what was the quote that I had read? It was really, I think it was like he runs the routes better than the receivers themselves. So he does some of the football IQ stuff really well. So I think he's very coachable when it comes to some of the mistakes he makes. Some of the mistakes in the run game, I think sometimes he might be compensating for how lanky he is. Sometimes guys don't trust their own strength, and he just kind of flings himself in the direction of a ball carrier instead of breaking down and really making the play. So between his attitude, between his flashes of having a really good football IQ, I'm not worried about that at all. I guess the one part of that is, sometimes with safeties especially, it's not about intellect, it's about mentality. Like Jalen Petrie is a super smart dude, but sometimes, man, he's of the mentality that he wants to go up and destroy stuff. And you just got to work with that, because you always want, the old saying, if a dog doesn't bite when it's a puppy, it's not gonna bite when it's an adult. Likewise, you'd rather have a puppy that bites and then teach him how not to bite. That's where Jalen Petrie is right now, just learning, okay, when discretion is the better part of valor, and I got to lay back a little bit. I think there's going to be a little bit of that with Calen Bullock, but he's just from watching him play, it seems like he would be very, very coachable, and he's going to respond really well to DeMeco.
Brian Bearfield.
Hey, Calen, welcome to Houston. Brian Bearfield, Big Sarge Media. Around you see me, just call me Sarge. Everybody else will. So I have two questions for you.
I like the branding. I like the branding on his hat, but I kind of miss the cowboy hat phase.
One, have you ever been to, have you ever gotten a chance to visit the city of Houston? And if so, what did you think about it?
Yeah, I got to visit when I took my 30 visits up there, but I really didn't get to see the city that much. I was just at the facility, but I think I would love Houston.
And the second question I have for you, as a former two-way player, you played receiver in
Yes, sir.
high school as well, right? So as a
Yes,
former
sir.
two-way player, when you play, does it make it easier for you as a defensive back, knowing that you ran those routes, seen those routes, and know some of their tendencies? Does it make it easier for you on the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, I would say it helped me a lot on the defense side of the ball because, like you said, I play receiver. Receiver is my first love, so it helps me. It's like a cheat code. I know when they're gonna break down. I know the certain amount of yards for them to run a certain amount of routes. So it really helps me on the defensive side, and then it helped me a lot with like my ball skills, I would say.
Yeah, that's boy, having a ball because he's long too. He's 6'2", and he's got ball skills. Like and he put him to use in college. He had a lot of opportunities too. So like, there's nothing to prevent. One thing, Frank, I have to address this, Frank, because it keeps catching my eyes in the Frank Z. Where'd you go? God, you guys are commenting so much. I gotta tell you, when it comes to using the national championship as an evaluator for an individual position player, my God, it drives me insane. Like I like that coaches like to get guys who are on national championships because it's good for the culture. But in terms of whether or not that should be a factor in whether the individual player is good as his position, you gotta let that go, man. If you've seen some of the guys from Georgia, like Georgia's defense, that were an awesome, all-time awesome defense, some of those guys have struggled in the NFL. Like it's just not that has zero to do with the actual individual player and his ability as a player on the field. It's good in the aggregate. So that's all. I do never ever say, well, this player is probably better than this player because this player played on a national championship team. Which is, I mean, like, is that why Peyton Manning sucks so bad? Because he couldn't win a national championship? All right, rant over. Next question.
Jonathan Alexander.
Calen, hey, congratulations. I was curious, what do you remember from your 30 visit with the Texans?
Oh, real quick too, Mr. Robot. I don't know what you're talking about here. I don't think you're talking about Bullock, but Bullock didn't miss a game in college. I don't think he missed a single game in college. So very durable for this team that's had a lot of injury issues. Very durable. All right, Frank, I'm not saying to discount it. You just keep bringing it up. Like you keep bringing up that, oh, this guy's a national champ. Right, he's a 7th rounder. Like, what the hell do I care about the national? It's nice. It's good. It's good for the team culture. It's good for all of that. But it's not like, oh, I didn't realize he was a national championship winner. Ooh. And this is what I'm going to tell you. This is what I'm going to tell you, Frank. This is my whole mentality about this stuff. Is that because I was a small school guy. When I got to the NFL, I was on a team with a couple of guys that had played for national championships, or over time I would get them. These guys roll through, and sometimes the players themselves, they'll act like it's something that they won a national championship, that almost like that you should respect them for it. And I would beat them down into the earth with all of the hatred that I had, because like this punk who's an awful football player got a scholarship to a huge school because he went to a big high school or something, or because he had an overactive pituitary gland when he was 13 years old. So when you tell me like, oh, you won a national championship, I want to beat them into the dirt. Okay? That's where I stand on that. So I have to put you in timeout if you keep bringing up that a guy won a national championship on a team sport and that somehow that makes him like a guy that's going to be a starter on day one or something. Damn it. There's nothing I love more than beating the crap out of rookies who were like from big time schools and thought that it mattered in the NFL. Disgusting. Next question.
And then I got another question after that.
I just remember everybody just there, the whole coaching staff just welcomed me with open arms. Everybody like loved me. It seemed like it was a great vibe from everybody in the building. Everybody was telling me what they loved about me. Nobody was like trying to downplay me like some other visits. Everybody was just telling me like what they expect out of me, what they see out of me, and telling me I got a bright future. So I really love that from the coaching staff.
Did you say they were downplaying him on other visits? Remember that story about Arthur Smith? He was telling it was Peter Skoronsky, I think, the guard from Northwestern, that like he was boring him in the interview and everything. Like Arthur Smith, who seems like just a super entertaining guy. Let's see.
Everybody just there, the whole coaching staff just welcomed me with open arms. Everybody like loved me. It seemed like it was a great vibe from everybody in the building. Everybody was telling me what they loved about me. Nobody was like trying to downplay me like some other visits. Everybody was just telling me like what they expect out of me, what they see out of me, and telling me I got a bright future. So I really love that from the coaching staff.
Oh, there we go. I wonder who the other teams are. Which teams do you think talked? I mean, sometimes teams are just trying to test you to see how you handle criticism.
And how did the I hopped on a little bit late, so I'm sorry if you've been asked this already. But how did the call go? Like, how quickly did you find out that the Texans were trading up for you? How did that call go?
It went great. The Texans called me. They called me and told me they were going to trade up for me, and then I'll say my emotions started going everywhere. My mom was next to me; she was crying. But I felt good about the pick because, like I said, I knew the coaching staff. I knew they really loved me as a player and as a person. So I knew I'd be in good hands. And I knew where the organization is going. I know it's a great place for me to be.
Kim Davis.
Hi, Calen. It's Kim Davis from Chalk Talk. Congratulations and welcome to Houston.
Kim has a strong glasses game. She's always got a different pair of glasses on.
Two questions. First, what is it that made you decide? You said receiver was your first love to decide to settle on the defensive side.
Yes, ma'am. I would say just growing up in like when you're in high school, you go to these camps. Everybody wants to play receiver. DB is the hard job. Nobody wants to play DB. Everybody's scared to lose reps and go out there and not win every rep. A DB is going to come with that. You're not going to win every single rep. So I remember going to the camps and the lines was really long. And I remember like, I want to get these reps. So I'm going to go to the DB side. So I went to the DB side and it worked out from there.
Oh, that's brilliant, man. This is game theory. He might be a genius because that is honestly something. I think I heard Daniel Jeremiah saying that you know, it's about like safety too. He was talking about that for the safety position, like there's jobs out there. No, he was talking about wide receivers, perhaps playing cornerback. That there's a lot of guys that like, man, if you would just play cornerback, the guy probably could be all world, or you know, at least give it a shot. But then also just the willingness to go out there and not be afraid of being beat. Like that's a mentality you got to have. So in wide receivers, I don't know if it's innate or if it just gets engineered into them over time. Like there's a different attitude. I think there's not necessarily like defensive backs they're grittier, you know, they're just grittier in a lot of ways. Like, because even the divas as wide receivers, even though they might have extroverted personalities and everything, it's almost like the more diva like they are, they're also actually emotionally fragile. Like good luck being an emotionally fragile defensive back.
And about the Texans defense, did you see them play much last year? And what do you know about this defensive unit?
Defense, it's a real young defense. They got some young pieces on the defense. I know the defense, they're going to play their heart out every single play. Everybody's on the defense seems really close. When I went to the facility, I got to meet some of the guys also and got to talk to them. And they was just telling me, like, it's a real family up there. And I know that me going into this team, I know I'm going to be walking with open arms and I'm going to hop on the train and get the rolling with the team, with the defense. And we're going to go out here and make plays.
All right. Thank you.
I like this kid so far. What's going on here with Greg Berg? Is Greg Berg an Indy fan? Latu is an arm breaker. Bad karma coming home. Did he break his arm as well as his neck? My God. Oof. Let's see. The whole thing about can't wait until Stroud has a career ending. Oh, all right. Yeah, I'm gonna break you. Okay. I'll get How do I get Greg? You're annoying me with that comment about I'll put you in timeout. Okay. Let's see. Back to we go.
Calen, what was it like going up against?
Oh, and real quick. It wasn't your bad, Frank. We're 2 hours and 15 minutes into this thing. I should have known better. You're fine, man. You're fine. That old Seth popped out for a little bit. We're fine. I would never block you the way I blocked that or put that Colts fan in timeout. And I wouldn't have put him in timeout if he hadn't said he wanted to see CJ get injured. My God.
Caleb in practice. And the second question I have, the follow-up question I have for you is, do you think that you are already prepared to come to the NFL, especially playing for USC? It seems like, that sideline is star-studded. So you all have, all kind of stars out at your game. So are you already prepared to come into the NFL?
Yeah, well, first question, competing against Caleb Williams every single day, it was a blessing because I know he's one of the best on that side of the ball, and he knows I'm one of the best on this side of the ball. So he pushed me every single day. I'll push him every single day, and we kind of hold each other accountable every single day, on and off the field. So that's a real close friend of mine, and I know that he's gonna kill it where he's at right now. But it was really good going against him, and then USC prepared me for this next level, like you said. It's everybody on the sideline. I got a lot of good resources around me, so I know I could reach out. I have great people like Taylor Mays in the room with me, who was once in my position as a safety, and I know like he helped me develop my game and helped me to what to expect at the next level. So I know I'm fully prepared for this.
You know what? We'll have to ask them. Now we got two guys from USC just this most recent year. Maybe they ask him about this, and I haven't seen it yet because I haven't seen this yet. But between Solomon Byrd and Calen Bullock, all these guys are going to be getting questions about Caleb Williams. Like, so what exactly did you guys feel that he was different? Did you feel that he was like Prince playing quarterback? All of this other stuff that's been floating around out there. And you know what? The thing is, with Caleb, was any of it even actually, were there ever even any reports? Was there any report at all that his teammates actually didn't like him, or coaches? Or was it just scouts that didn't like that he paints his fingernails and has a pink phone and cried in his mother's bosom? Because I don't know if I don't recall seeing a single report from the team itself. Now, you could say that about a lot of quarterbacks in the past, who's the guys on the team just know you're not going to talk smack about the quarterback to reporters or whatever. But I'd be curious about that. I'm intrigued. I try not to judge the Zoomers, they live life differently than we do.
Thank you.
All right, we'll close with Aaron Wilson.
And Calen, when you are able to have 9 career interceptions, obviously have a nose for the football, how would you describe sort of the way you instinctively are able to anticipate what the quarterback's doing and have a follow-up?
I would say just watching film. Watching film helps me play fast. And I know what to expect. I know what to read when I'm watching films. I was on the opposite side of the ball, so I know where this quarterback's about to throw this ball. I know when to break. And I would say that helped me get a lot of interceptions. I've always been a guy who liked interceptions.
Oh, that's what I was going to say too.
And
the based on his earlier answer about knowing how many yards this route was going to be or how many steps he's going to take, I just like that because it does show an attention. I bet he was a good detailed route runner. I bet, which now it makes me nervous that somehow at some point Bobby Slowick's going to want him. Let him learn how to play defensive back in the NFL first, and then maybe somewhere down the road he can run some routes if he's pressed into service. But yeah, just by knowing if he was detailed enough as a wide receiver to really understand, especially when receivers start altering their routes based on coverage and everything like that. That's cool. It's like I said, I think it's coming through in his interview, and it shows up on film that he's thinking about the game on a different level than a lot of guys. And some of the mistakes that he makes, or some of the errors, I think it's very, very coachable, and he seems like he's pretty it seems like he's got that curiosity about the game that the good players do.
I think you did trips with Falcons, Dolphins, Jaguars. What were some of the other ones that you remember?
49ers, the Chargers.
Oh, that's the end of it. Why'd they edit that out? Why'd the Gestapo get rid of that? I don't know. All right, we got to make a decision here. As far as Calen Bullock goes, I love his personality, but B, really like the potential that he has, especially in a position that, there's a boatload of good ones who don't go in the first round for whatever reason, just because of the value of the safety position. I think he has the upside with his length and his ball tracking abilities, some of those things that aren't coachable, but he also displays a lot of the football IQ and coachable elements too, that are really intriguing. And I think this year, what I'm also hoping for is that a lot of the defensive backs, might simply grade out better by virtue of the front seven playing better. You know, there were times last year where I think Jalen Petrie needs to clean some things up, but there were also times last year where I think he felt like he had to compensate for poor coverage by the linebackers, and he ended up having to cover a much larger radius than he really should have had to. And if you get a better pass rush up front, not just, you know, they did a steadily better job of getting a rush in the second half of last season, but if it's even that much better this year, that makes everybody's job a lot easier on the back end. That part of it, I'm really, really excited to see exactly how all that plays out. So I got to make a decision about whether we listen to Cade Stover right now or not. I don't think I better, because I think the Astros. What time are the Astros started already? All right. I'm going to go. I'm Seth Payne. If any of you joined this and you don't know me, I played for the Texans a long time ago, first 5 years of the franchise, played in the NFL for 10 years. I do Sports Radio 610, the morning show from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. on Sports Radio 610. But I also have this YouTube channel where I do a boatload of Texans content. Going to do more just general NFL content here in the future once we get out from behind the draft. But having a really good time with it, mostly because for the most part, like only 0.1% of people are D-bags on here, which I find refreshing. You know what? Okay, let me do one more thing. I can't quit any of you. I saw a few of you talking about your grades. I try to be as objective as possible by looking outside of those of us who might be looking at things through battle red colored glasses. The draft grades, just by way of having a brief survey here. Mel Kiper gave the Texans a B+, which again, I think as one of you pointed out this earlier, there was so much excitement with free agency and trades leading up to the draft that I think that was without some big names like a Kool-Aid, or at least cool names like a Kool-Aid McKinstry, or trading up for a Terrion Arnold or something in the first round. I think it was going to be a little bit of a letdown. There's a kind of it's almost like free agency was like when you win that big race. But then like right now is the day after, when everything feels like a little bit of a letdown. You get that dopamine deficit. That's where we are with this, because we had a whole lot of excitement in the spring, but just name recognition and not drafting in the first round is going to make it less exciting. Mel Kiper gives the Texans a B+. He said the top needs entering the draft were cornerback, defensive tackle, and offensive line. For a team without a first-round pick, the Texans traded theirs to the Vikings. Yeah, we know that, Mel. Houston had a nice Friday. It filled a void at cornerback with Kamari Lassiter, who might have been a first-rounder if he was a little faster. He consistently locked down the corners at Georgia and allowed 2.8 yards per attempt, which ranked third in the FBS. Blake Fisher had a chance to be a first-rounder in 2025 if he had returned to college. Got moved off to right tackle just because of Joe Alt. I mean, he could have been a left tackle too. Not that matters as much these days. Fourth round pick to move up to round 3 to take Cade Bullock, who had 9 interceptions in college and can play center fielder in the NFL. Yes. Well, Mel, Houston ranked 29th in yards per pass attempt allowed. 7.7 yards per attempt. I knew it was bad, but for some reason I hadn't seen the 7.7. Tight end Cade Stover made my favorites list. I saw Cade Stover on a few people's lists as one of the bargains of the draft or the steal of the draft. That's why I was surprised. I was really surprised to see, and maybe this is just me checking Twitter at the wrong time. I saw somebody, I think it was Corey Barrett, talking about like how many Texans fans were down on that pick, on the Cade Stover pick. And I was really surprised by that. I thought between being a teammate to see, like without even watching any film, I thought that the casual fan, just by virtue of him being at Ohio State, being CJ Stroud's teammate, being a name that people had heard before, that people would have been excited about that. I'm super excited about Cade Stover. My one reservation in the past was that he's not a great blocker, but I will put a yet behind that because he's only been playing tight end. I didn't realize when I first started learning about him that he'd only been playing tight end for a couple of years, that he was a running back and a defensive end in high school in his first year in college. So he looks like a willing blocker. I think it's pretty rare that a kid grows up on a farm and isn't willing to block. So I'm really excited about the Cade Stover pick. I really like that he goes aggressively back to the ball too. That's just one of my pet peeves when receivers don't work back towards the ball. Cade Stover will move back aggressively towards the ball, which I'm sure that CJ likes as well. Rick Spielman with CBS made a good point. Texans made a main course during free agency, so the draft was just salad, bread, and desserts. Thank you, Scott, for repeating that after I'd seen it earlier. Let's see. It's pretty serious when you semi-retire from an injury in the neck or only 3. Oh, are you talking about when I made that thing about the neck? I was talking about Latu to that Colts fan. He does play. The thing about Latu, I'll say this without like talking smack about it. The last time I was miserable on YouTube, it was when I got drunk before the Ravens game and talked too much smack. And it made my whole experience miserable for a week because Ravens fans are feisty. I love Latu. I love him like as a kid that was threatened with not playing football for a couple of years, but was cleared to play and ended up becoming one of the most polished pass rushers I've ever seen as a college defensive end. I mean, it's really fun to watch. But there's 2 things. One is that he doesn't really have a speed to power element to his game. And when you saw him go up against a kid from Oregon State, and it was like him running into a brick wall. And I think it showed up elsewhere too. Like some of his only speed to power looks are versus like Coastal Carolina. And the other side of it is just simply that because of that neck injury, he plays very upright, including, I mean, there's part of it that is his rugby training. He's a smart tackler because in rugby, you can't just be plowing your head into piles all the time. It's stupid, right? So in rugby, and there's a lot of rules in rugby that prevent you from getting injured. There's not nearly as much violent collision in rugby as there is in football. And when there is, you have to wrap up the tackle and everything. So he plays like a rugby player in a good way in some respects, but there's other times where it just looks like he's trying not to stick his neck out there, like quite literally. And I just wonder how that's going to translate to the NFL. So, and again, I say that, I mean, I despise him as a Colt, but I love him as a kid that just is obviously put his time in and like developed his craft. I'm intrigued to see how it all plays out. Yeah, my brother played for the USA Rugby, played for the Eagles in the World Cup a long time ago, and it's fun. It's fun because he's played both sports obviously and has a good perspective on everything. And there's not one bit of him that like needs to brag about not wearing pads or anything. Like they're different sports. They're completely different sports. Oh, the Bulls. All right. I'm going to get going. I'm going to go watch some Astros and cut up a few of this. Thank you, everybody. I had a lot of fun doing this for an hour and a half longer than I thought I was going to do it. Thanks, everybody.